Let us be
listening to Off Planet Radio
What
at
once was
offplanetradio.net and offplanetradio.com.
and in its place there arose two worlds. Worlds as different as daylight and darkness. Virtue and evil.
Rockets blasting tonight and firewalls up. Everything is pretty much good to go, except for the fact that apparently the website, the people that apply our chat client for us, Chatango, which is a rather major supplier of chat client software across the interwebs, has gone down. So we have no chat clients. So for those of you who are listening live tonight and wish to monitor the proceedings and interact with us, which is really the point of doing a live show anyway, Facebook is going to be the best place to do that, either on our guests webpage or on my website, which is on my Facebook, which is my name, Randy Mawkins, or you can go to Off Planet Radio on Facebook. And we're battling all sorts of gremlins in terms of technical things. It's not like we don't do this every week, and every week it seems like I have to redo the streaming in some manner. I'm told that I'm getting a little bit of static on my microphone, and hopefully we're adjusting that now. Couple of notes before we begin tonight. First off, I need to say thanks to people who have been sending donations in, and that's helped a lot. Some of the projects that we're launching. Apparently now I'm going to have to put up a chat client on the websites, and beginning of the year we will begin streaming once again from offplanetradio.com on our own streaming page, and we will have interactivity set up as well. So a lot of things are in flux and in play. The Pirate Bay, the bastion of the torrent movement, basically distribution of software and all kinds of media type things, has been taken out single-handedly by Sony Pictures, who have apparently deployed their cash funds to bribe governments of the world to use police force to take out private servers, which, yes, they do pirating, and yes, they do, I guess, what you would call illegal wares, but at the same time, they never actually hosted anything. I don't know how you convict people of sharing links, but that's the way it works. Oddly enough, even the government of Peru has refused to host the servers for the Pirate Bay, so it appears as though they're down for the count right now, and we'll hold on and see if the Pirate Bay comes back. I'm a champion of hackers. Now, not necessarily malicious, but I'm a champion of people who are attempting to break the system down, and that's exactly what these guys have done. They've gone to prison over it. A lot of people have been wounded, and it does not bode well for the Pirate. My guest tonight is somebody that, oddly enough, well, there's nothing odd and there's no coincidences. There are simply synchronicities. But about 6 months ago, I discovered on my hard drive, on my Mac, this book called Decoding the Matrix. I have no idea where this book came from. I don't remember downloading it. I know it's a free book. And so I dumped it over onto my tablet and began to read it. Oddly enough, I was contacted, and tonight with me, for the first time, is my guest, who's going to talk to us about, well, you know, back in the day when I did the threshing floor, I used to say that all the puzzle pieces were on the table, and we simply needed to become puzzle masters. And that was kind of the goal, was to be decoding all of the things which at that time had to do with the scriptures in the Bible and prophecy and world events, and eventually cascaded out into my own movement away from fundamentalist Christianity into Gnosticism, then eventually an embrace of a wider worldview that included kind of embracing who I was and the things that I had come to understand over the course of my own life and my own experiences as well. So tonight we have with us live for 2 hours what somebody I consider to be one of the great puzzle masters, one of the great decipherers of the code that runs this planet. I want to welcome, for the first time to Off Planet Radio, Sevan Bomar. Welcome and good evening.
Tonight, I'm overjoyed because I know that you're an individual that will know everything that I'm discussing as we go on this galactic adventure. You know, I cleaned it off. You know, I did land before I got on the phone because I had to, just in the anticipation of this meeting. But, you know, I cleaned it off. I sand down a lot of the extra lumps in the craft. And so as we, you know, go off into this adventure, I know it's going to be smooth from here. And people don't understand, you know, not to get long-winded about anything, but Sony, if you look in the Code of the Matrix, and the Code of the Matrix is like 5 years old, it's like a classic or something in its own right.
It is a classic, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I think personally, I even look at it sometime and I'm like, man, you know, to do that, because that was in 1 month I wrote that book, and, you know, it didn't even make final edit before it's just out there. But I've always tried to get back in there and write the master's edition, and it's just like, you know, knowing so much now, it's hard to put it into pen and paper. But Sony is Scion. Like, we got cracked that already. The Y is always an I. So what you get is SONI. And then when you know, just move that around, it's Scion. And Scion, which is basically the god of the scientists, was hacked today. And basically, the funniest quote was, they were hacked back into the Stone Age. I don't think it was today, excuse me, but they were hacked this week. Back into the Stone Age, as they say. And just in that alone, you know, if you understand a little bit of the Matrix, even though it's got a little spin on it, but you understand that once the database crumbles and whatever's in those files, just like what Swartz did, Andrew Swartz, he pulled all those files from JSTOR. And people are not thinking about, well, was there anything about spirituality? Probably 1 in every 500 in there was about something to do with spirituality, but it's so key. And that's why, of course, you see, you know, Pirate Bay coming down also is because they were hosting, you know, amongst many other things, many of the most occult torrents, unoccultating torrents, I would say, because occult is to hide something, that were, you know, ever known in the face of mankind. So, you know, it's just, many people are working on this. Some people are going to jail over this. Some people are dying over this, you know, and some people are up all night over this. And what is it? It's totality, to bring it all together. So what we can do to, you know, leave our streak in the sky is take whatever we have and hurl it into this awakening also. And sometimes for people nowadays, you know, it's just a click of a button sometimes. You know, you're just in the right chat or in the right place, you send the right information, and then bam, it's linking people. We have 9 billion people or 8 billion people, so, you know, it'll get to them. But if you just think of now how much your mailbox is always full of just different stuff about, you know, ranging from fluoride all the way to,
oh my gosh, yeah,
you know,
yeah.
archons. It just doesn't, you get the whole wide gambit of it. So I would just say in that alone, you know, we're making some massive progress. But tonight's conversation is for the connoisseur, you know, the connoisseur of spirituality, the overachiever, the one who really, really wants to know just because they want to vividly be involved in it, not just be told a story. So that's what makes it adult. So it's wherever you want to go tonight, Randy. That's all I'm saying in so many words.
No, and I got to thank you, because I felt the pull when I was sitting here with a mixer that clearly wasn't functioning correctly. And this is like jumping out of an airplane and getting down to around 5,000 feet and discovering that you can't find the ripcord. So it's like a midair crack up, and at the last second you're going, I feel it, and suddenly you're like, crap, the ground's coming up fast, and we pulled it off. It's embarrassing when that kind of thing happens. But you know what? It's actually good because we've become, and you talked earlier about Blog Talk Radio and some of the other platforms that are out there, and how now everybody's a talk show host. And I talked about this on last week's show, I think. But in some ways, we've become as slick and professional as the mainstream media, which clearly have us outganged in terms of money and high-end technology and stuff, and we forget that sometimes the substance has to triumph over the showbiz aspect of it. So having a radio show fall apart on me was embarrassing, humiliating, and at the same time, it was marvelously clarifying in terms of reminding me of the frailty of the media itself, and yet the power that we can use to connect. Because I know there's people out there, and again, we're on Facebook tonight. If you can connect through Sevan's webpage, I'm scanning that. I'm scanning my Facebook page. I got a chat client up that's pulling in stuff. It's all good. So I say all that to say that when I interviewed you tonight, Sevan, I talked about being a puzzle master, and my background is that basically I spent 7 years on international shortwave radio deciphering the Bible and prophecy. And at the end of it, I discovered that everything that I knew about all of that, all the religion, everything I was raised with, the fundamentalism, going through the charismatic church, being a minister, all of that stuff fell apart when I realized that I was too literal, that I wasn't seeing the bigger picture. And the bigger picture came in a moment that I went through, which was dark night of the soul, basically. Mm-hmm. But it was when I learned how to collapse into myself and begin to apprehend the universe from inside rather than pulling off of the external. And I know that you come from that space. I know that that's exactly what you're talking about when you use the term understanding. Mm-hmm. And maybe we can just pivot off of that, because I got a sense that you have something to deliver tonight that's kind of like a right now word, and my job is basically to kind of get you into that space.
Nice. Well, yeah, I mean, actually, we're even moving beyond understanding, because it's very simple when you start to really look at it, and you see the progress, because the human being is going through a process and a sequence. Hopefully, it's a spiral rather than a circle. So by the end of the night, people will know exactly what that means. But as we're going through this process, I'd like to say, we start at 2, and that's the dualistic yin and yang, and the night and the day, and good and bad, and sheep and goat, and Jehovian, Luciferian, whatever opposing odds you can really think of, which really create what we think is ad infinitum. But as you see, there's quite a few different items in the world, and that's the forces that they were created with, basically fire and water. And beyond that, though, we find wholeness, because wholeness is when a person is actually, after they've monitored enough of this and ciphered enough of this, and they see there's nothing new under the sun, they realize as long as they pretty much do opposite to what everyone else is really doing as far as a mainstream is concerned, maybe they will find themselves in the right direction, because from their perspective, everything that everyone else is doing is wrong. And that's actually the beginning of wholeness. And then where you're going is, wholeness is very synonymous with a cave. It's a womb. You're going inside for a while. But it's also not hard to see that inside of that cave, there's also that's the wonderland. It's the rabbit hole itself. There's tons of things. It's now about yourself, but you don't know who you even are. So wholeness is a very unique path and a very necessary part of a way into a grander stage of consciousness. But it's not the end, because there's no end. And that's really what this has always been about, with us delivering this knowledge. We're only perfecting what we're doing here. And, so I may have started at one phase, but I will hope that all the people who know me or have heard of me wouldn't think I would just stay at that phase.
Right. Let me ask you a question, because you used the term consciousness, and I have struggled with consciousness since I was a teenager. I became interested in the subject, and I've studied it, and I've read hundreds of books. And my understanding of consciousness at this point is that it is the aperture by which we perceive a greater reality, but it is not the thing itself. Do you agree with that, or can you update me?
Oh, for sure. I mean, anything that we can put a title on it will be that way. I mean, the bitter truth about it is that once the words start and the marks start and the shape and the forming and the fashioning and the cutting, once that begins, you're not going to get the totality. So it becomes a simple question in a certain tense. It's like, for me, it's like, is it a 2, a 0, or a 1? And from that point, just with that HUD, you can dissect, unless you want to make it complicated for yourself, everything that's going on in the illusion. See, what happens is the only thing that's really true is totality. Once you begin to divide totality, it becomes what we call an illusion. It's not as it really appears. For a simple example, if you're looking at a road, the road gradually gets narrower as you look at it, but the road's gotten no narrower. If you look at the sun on the equator, it's large, but then away from the equator, it's small, but the sun's not changed size. And it's the same thing as if you drive through this stench, but you can't see anything in the air. It doesn't mean that nothing's not there, because there's at least a particle there, but you can't see it. So all depths know that's the description of the senses. They only have a certain perception of what they can really see, but it's not true completely. It serves for certain purposes. It's good enough, especially for duality, because it's two eyes, but it's not going to show you the whole thing, and it's just not. And so when one stops playing that game and starts realizing that there is another world, there is another world for your perception, and then starts digging into that, that's the rabbit hole. That's when you're going into that portal, that zero, and then you're going to find something, and hopefully, I could say for all the people at least that I've had an opportunity to speak to on one way or another, that you reach oneness, which is basically it's the center pillar. It is what it is. Time is a circle. It's a bubble. A one is like a pin. It just pops it. And then that's the end of time, because now you've merged in with this straight lane. But then what's beyond that, because there is something beyond that. It's like, oh, is that the end? What's beyond that we can't fit it in this language. We can't fit it in to explain, oh yeah, let me tell you what happened when I went beyond. Let's cut it out. You were not beyond. You may have made it almost to oneness and got up in the many different, more perfected worlds in between oneness and wholeness. But as far as to say that you went to the great beyond, that's what we don't speak of, because it doesn't encompass words. And I believe that because it shows that many beings are actually standing at that gate and not going into the great beyond themselves because of the fear of what goes on in there, because they believe that you lose yourself completely. So what I've learned and discovered through experience is that we do have the ability to go beyond, but we must do it together. Because how the organism was actually put together was in wholeness, the entire planet. But there's a way to synchronize the entire field. It's like when you see these pyramids laying around and you see all this stuff laying around, it's like broken parts to a machine. And if someone could raise the jet, reconnect the grid, the earth would go into alignment. Its heart would become centered. Because if we notice that the heart is positioned at the same degree away from the center of the body, that the earth is on a wobble. So it lets you see that Earth's heart is out of center too. It's like a metaphor, but it's a real thing going on. And so we get a chance now to balance our heart, which is also an anagram for Earth, and then get ready to go into the beyond together. And some people they have a hard time believing this can go on, and it's beyond belief though, because what's happening is that how they kept saying we were flying through this photon belt, and what that is basically these super dense energetic particles, and they don't know what it is, but they just know we're flying through it, and we'll be flying through it for the next 200 years. What
Right.
it is this quickening. The more energy you get per square hypercube, then there becomes this connectivity to where the hologram itself starts to shine in its original image before it merges with the original image. And so this is what we're dealing with now with this quickening, and that's why this kind of knowledge is available. Like, I still scan through history now. There's some people that came out, and for that time, they really had it nailed. Like, they had all the information right there. It's just about what was still the comprehension level of the masses, and how also prepared were they to enter into real energetics. Because the thing about, you know, the real spiritual path is it's very vivid. You have the elements coursing through your body. So at this point, you know, about a long time ago, you had realized it wasn't a game. And then that the body needs to stay in this certain kind of condition to get beyond, or it just goes into fear and it just bogs down. So where people are now, and where we're going to get people out of, is bogged down into a circle of fear, not a vortex. See, I have to correct a lot of my terminology, especially as I continue to grow and continue to learn from the masters that make themselves available to teach. Well, what happens from here is that we get how, especially by the end of this show, if we can continuously broadcast, how to break out of time, how to be outside of time, how time was even created, and how to be really still on watch with what's going on around you, not in judgment, just in watching of what's going on around you, in order to make sure you're not falling into these cymatic webs that are being weaved by others. That, you know, it's like crabs in the bucket. They just rather get you trapped in their net and feed on you before they get to even a point of their own consciousness where they realize that that's keeping them stuck. And so it's about how to really deal with the environment as it is, and then how also to deal with this, as they say, the word is environment, first of all. So it's not out-vironment. So this lets us see very clearly that there's a couple things that need to go on in your spaceship. And what happens is that if you don't get those parts, then, see, the body is a little bit more convinced about its existence than the mind.
Right. Yeah, we're very attached to this.
Yes. And this is because it's gone basically from amoeba to human. And in between there, the last actually 3 stages is basically reptile, demon, then human. So if you're talking about a being that actually will progress into its next stage of physical vessels, but the mind, which is really like a puff in a cloud until it has a really strong will, is saying, hey, man, no more incarnations. Now I got 2 extra appendages over here, and we kind of ditched the wings, and, what's going on? And, ready to make its way back to totality. And so it's a grand adventure. And so what I, again, want to center around today is, how a person can get on that adventure vividly. I mean, obviously, there's a lot in the fabric of the reality that's calling to us synchronicity, synchronistically all the time. But we want to know for sure what those synchronicities mean, and we can.
So somewhere in all of that, where I want to draw you back to for a minute is what I've heard you talk about in terms of collapsing time. Well, I think anybody that's done the metaphysical thing knows that, time breaks down pretty quickly. Whether you're having like a vision or some sort of out-of-body experience or something, it becomes pretty obvious real quickly that time is immaterial, especially if you're like in dream state or something like that. How did we get entangled into this chronosphere, this web of time?
Okay, very simple. Time is frequency. Okay, and once you even just put that into the brain and then start playing around with that, all this stuff will start unlocking for you. So, because what happens is the reason why people experience slow down and then speed up of time, and then other objects slowing down while they speed up, is because they're changing frequencies. And when they change frequencies, subservient frequencies respond to dominant frequencies.
Right. Just like in music,
for
there's
sure.
dominant tone.
Exactly. And so what happens is that as the oscillations go on, these are just basically the bands or the harmonic groups that have been created within the wavelength. This means that there's groups of individuals that resonate certain frequencies, and they bind themselves together, and it looks like a band, just like they say, oh, we need to play in the band. And then so you have all the parts in the band. You got saxophone, singer, etc. And the best bands have the most players. So even the archons, when they banded themselves together on the Mount Hermon, they were playing in an orchestra together and used their essence to create what we're looking at. And that was like the beginning of the knowledge. Everyone already knew that, because these entities, which there was more than one that fell from Venus, they had this ability to bring things into manifestation based on the intonations. They did not speak what we call languages, based on the intonations of their consciousness and them attempting to do what is basically impossible, which is to create something in the physical world that's perfect. And so I don't even believe personally the goal was to create something perfect. The goal was to recreate. Okay, because notice the word and the terminology that's being used is that somebody's trying to create, but you can't create anything. You're going to be recreating if you try to do it from the prima materia, because the prima materia is just all one thing. And so what we're talking about is recreation. And this is where we get into, there's two sides here, and people need to understand this, because this may be the only time they ever hear it. But there is really a side here that is working on some kind of malevolent activities against humanity. But they do make up that other side of the yin and yang that is the chariot that the more massive beings even move on. So there's no right and wrong in this, but still understand what's going on. It's a difference between a circle and a spiral, what's called pi or phi. And what Pythagoras did when going into the Kemetic knowledge is attempted to basically plagiarize nature or the netters by creating a symbol, which was the pentagram. That was the symbol of a Pythagoras, like they show on the Dr. Donald Duck cartoon. They said the Pythagoreans, and he opens his hand's got a pentagram, because a pentagram is not a pentagon, if you understand the difference between the two. But it's just that little bit of difference that means the difference between what basically is like a GMO, meaning something that sprouts, it sprouts like the real one, but it can't vortex. It can't create, when you plant 700, you plant a seed of corn, it won't grow like that, because it's artificial. It's moving in a circle. It's trapped in time. That's a GMO. So if for some reason the living organisms on the planetary systems, in this case that would be us in these bodies, start to take in many of this, and it's really even geometric like that when you can go under the microscope and see it, but some of this pentagrammic type sorcery, then that's where time begins. That becomes trapped in time. So then back in the day when this was like common knowledge, and you had a lot of people actually that were working to trap other people in time, and they were called weavers of webs. Okay, because there was an original being that basically brought this kind of knowledge to this system and what we became in this system. And the reason why you know that's true is because that's the Promethean, in a sense, the fire of God, which is basically the knowledge of phi and fire. So there's nobody out there that anytime you start talking Kemetans are going to say anything. I don't care how far they think they've made it up the ladder. This is all the way down from India, all the way back to Uzbek, all the way over into Bosnia, all the way. And it's because there was an inception of the ones who brought fire to this world, or brought that knowledge of time. You see, like even if you drop a big pyramid, it's doing what it always did. You drop a big pyramid and you encode something inside of it, people are going to try to break the code. And then in that trying to break the code, language is formed. Pi is formed. Now, pi being like a circle, not natural, not like the original one, it actually will attempt to form itself based on what it learned before. So you see how anything that is not perfect has to go through the process of making itself perfect. So it's through that. I was talking to a guy today about it. Through these mistakes, like you see somebody, you know, we were looking at this guy. He was riding this motorcycle, man. He was riding this motorcycle, man. Him and the motorcycle had become one. And I said, you know, you can see it everywhere when you're a cipherist, the truth. And there's going to be much falling off the motorcycle before you can get to that stage. So that's what I see this whole existence as now, is the falling off the motorcycle until you become perfected at it. And then what happens from this point is, and this is what we get a chance to do, is we get a chance to smooth many of those spikes. It's a spike on one end, a dent on the other. That's how the worlds work. But those spikes are those dents that are when things occur in your life and it causes you to go into this higher or drastically higher or drastically lower frequency. And I say drastically, and it's because now through those experiences is how you see life. Those are the experiences that changed your frequency from where it was in that previous point. Do you see what I mean? So if you see yourself at the end of your life and you see your entire life, what do you think you're going to see? Do you think you're going to see the whole thing play out? No, you're going to only see the spikes and the dents. And so a part of this work is about teaching people how to smooth that out, how to actually get into their own consciousness and remove what's known as the accuser. And you know about the accuser. The dweller, that was the other name.
Is that like the dweller and the threshold?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wholly created by ourselves, though. That's what those books didn't conclude with. And everyone was afraid of the dweller. And then no one knew.
Wait, this is a key point. Mm-hmm. Because one of the things that I've been thinking about is taking responsibility for creations, which is something humanity does not do real well.
Exactly.
If you just look at the alternative media, they bitch and they moan about the powers that be and the cabal and the New World Order and the Illuminati. And it's like, wait a minute, who empowered these people in the first place? And I mean, collectively, we can take responsibility for that. But now you got to drive it down to the individual level. And all of a sudden you're going, but wait a minute, what is my contribution to this too? Because I've been bitching and complaining about this stuff too.
Yeah, I mean, we call that judging. And of course, you know, judge and ye shall be judged. And this is not the standard judging that most people are familiar with. This is, you know, it just boils down also to something simple, wasting your time. Because realistically, to try to change someone else, that's pretty much the worst violation that you can do. You can help them. You could try to convince them. You can become an eloquent explainer. But who actually flips the switch is still that person. So, you know, dangerous territories when you're trying to force someone to do something, because then you become entangled with them. So it's a real thing to you know, it's a whole nother thing. And I get it, though. Like, I get why we need to go through this certain experience. And it's our first time. You always know somebody's first time by how newbie they are. And if there's no newbies to the human body more than the human, I don't know what else there is. I mean, the reality is that there's something entirely different going on with the body, and I tap completely into it. But it's not common knowledge at all. And so that already lets me know. It's like something silent saying, you see? Do you see how firm the grip is, how tight the shell is? There's 8 billion. Now remember, back in the day, remember the story was happening in that book. They said they couldn't find one. There was no one who knew how to contact God. Mm-hmm. And if you understand it from the Gnostic tradition, God was inside. We know that. So that means nobody could contact inside anymore. That's what that's really saying. So the world had gone nuts. So if we want to pick up the book for a minute, we can look at it as somewhat of a historical measure of history repeating itself. It got to a point where everyone was so external because of what they consumed that they forgot about the internal, and people were so deep into that nobody wanted to make that sacrifice. Basically, what was the sacrifice? To satiate your fire. Lucifer. You see what I mean? To satiate the fire is to dump water on the fire, to actually practice some level of not feeling like every single thing that you deny yourself is a limitation. Because that's where the next stage of mine is going with the whole New Age thing. Is then they tie it into their sexual desires, and they tie it into their religious ideas and beliefs, and they tie it in, and it just keeps morphing itself. Though people think that they're just going to stay as one being. No, you're possessing yourself. So every time you add on another bolt-on Metatron, then what happens is you end up with this complex system to run called a body. Like, I'm not even talking about the external world. Like, once we get a load of the body, and this thing, especially when it gets ragged down, it needs so much maintenance. But if it gets sick, it does affect us. You know, the body, you've been through a bad cold before at least, and you see how it's just, you have a hard time bringing yourself up to going to do something amazing, right? So it lets us see, once again, that the grip, because that's what you're dealing with, it's like a shell, the grip that it has on the consciousness is so tight because it's afraid. And so remember, there's only two roads here, fear or arousal. Everything that you see functioning on the dualistic world will either function on fear and arousal. So obviously, you know which one most people are tapped into is fear. They basically go to work because if they don't go to work, they won't get a check. If they get a check, if they get fired, then they go downtown, they're broke. And then, you know, it's just a whole, it's a circle. They call it the cycle or the cycle. It's both the same word, right? So what happens is that motivation by fear, though, is, you know, it's a mean course. And that's why I really got that. That's what the religious traditions were about, especially the Christianity, et cetera, because it motivates itself on fear, not arousal. Because in the psyche of the consciousness, all adepts know there's only two, fear and arousal. So what does the church focus on? No arousal. I mean, you can see there, they're like, no arousal. But here's behind curtain number 2. Actually, you can't see behind the curtain number 2, because if you see behind curtain number 2, ye will die. Right? Like, so there's all this fears. Right. God is terrible. Yeah. And so I remember even, you know, because this is someone who is been in the practice, just such as yourself, meaning that was what was brought to me as the way since I was a child to get to God. So because that was my desire, I fulfilled that desire by going through that system and doing that genuflection with everything that was there so I could see what it was, just like yourself. You know, I can't really say I walked away now that I understand what's going on, because it's really all a ladder. And walking away would be actually when you...
No, I agree with you on that. And I've had to make that clarification a number of times. I don't have regrets about it. I think people walk out of that system rather wounded, though.
Oh, for sure.
And I think, you know, that until there's a season of healing, most people don't have a perspective on it. But I view it all as foundational, as getting me to a place where I could expand out. And I'm grateful that I was able to launch off, because I see a lot of people that are stuck in that.
Yeah,
or
I mean, because I mean, the truth is,
stuck in whatever.
Yeah, you had a key word there, wounded, and it's wounded because they've been tread upon. Because the Christian church makes up the base pillar of the ziggurat. Mm-hmm. And so just the whole mentality of how one thinks of themselves when they're going through that tradition, they build up this foundation. And then what happens if they graduate is they get to this next stage of consciousness where they don't want to be a slave anymore. Because, I mean, it's very direct. Working for something is basically a slave. So, and then that type of terminology is thrown around and used. And so even in the physicality, many people have come from traditions where their parents or family, great-great-grandmothers, et cetera, have been slaves. In fact, so many people, way more people have that story than not, from all colors, Polish, Danish, Serbian, you name it, have been enslaved under what? See, some people think that this just stays either in the physical world or in the spiritual world, but no, on the planet Earth, they are one, because Rex Mundi, or the Lord of the Earth, does embody the king. And that's how it works. The entity that would sit in the position of ruler, the frequency that would sit in the position of ruler. And people need to think about this, because they always look to these people and they start thinking reptiles. And look, it's a basic thing. If you can actually do that, you get into this frequency that taps you into the other beings that also do that. meaning rule over other people like you're their leader and that you're going to tell them what to do and you keep all the knowledge from them and you put them in debt, and that's all a frequency. So that specific frequency is a band or a group of beings that has been dealing with the world for a prolonged period of time. And in itself, it makes up the next pillar that is on top of the base pillar. So that's the only reason why it can exalt itself at all. And that's why it was tied into the moon in a certain tense. But the only reason why it could exalt itself, because it was only one station higher than the ones that had been made of flesh, or the one who took the the Ma body, which is man, woman, or the fleshly body. And so, but the gig is up, because what we get a chance to do is magnify, okay, refine, distill this seed that has been developed within us. And then that seed will birth itself, and it will be an immaculate conception. Why? Because it was born inside of us. And we cycle and turn energy and compress energy all the time, because inside, see, the fire is what creates the seed. The water is what rains on the seed. So man is fire. He's the one that creates the seed. That's the sea man. And then woman is water. Obviously, she's the one that cultivates the seed. So we need to understand that inside of our bodies, you have these two channels. And you have to get a fair share of both of those channels. And most importantly, you need to understand the difference between the front door and the back door of your consciousness. And so instead of elaborating on that now, we'll make a small note of it, but we'll dive back in directly to what we were talking about.
So the body is not an enemy. The body is what in relationship to where we want to go here. How do we deal? Because we're over-identified. We have, what was the term that you used earlier? We basically have elevated ourselves. We worship ourselves. We've enthroned ourselves. We're identified with the body, but the body itself is not the evil. Nor is there evil, but how do we work through this? What is the process?
Simple. Understanding the difference between synergy and energy, okay? And it's a very fine line here, but I'll show you the difference. See, energy always has a byproduct. We burn oil, it produces carbon monoxide, and all the rest of the stuff is leaking out the back. So all of the fuels that are used are for their energies. Okay, what synergy is when something is working in succession and so perfect that it actually generates a large amount of energy and has virtually no waste. So our bodies is being, in this case, phi, not pi. Phi have to actually get into a sequence where it's very similar to the fire versus food versus fire versus water versus, meaning that you have to be able to cycle the energies through your body in balance. So as I said, it's now as simple as understanding fire versus water and how to get the right measures of those two, especially utilizing breathing, backing down on certain substances that really work with fire more. So, but if you want to understand it mentally as an explanation, that synergistic connection with your body versus an energetic connection with the body. Because, see, most people have an energetic connection with their body from what they've learned. So that's why they can actually eat something that goes and attacks another part of their body. That's not synergy. The energy is the pleasure center. The pleasure center wants the energy. The pleasure center gets the energy. And then the byproduct of that energy, basically waste, which accumulates in the rest of the parts of the body, then other parts of the body have to deal with it. So symbolically, what this also is that on the higher rung up there with the Lord, let's say, that's where all the toxins are created. And then the toxins are flushed down into the lower areas of the system, the world. And then people are left to deal with just the waste of what's going on in the mismanagement of the energy. See, and the energy is the energetic field of the planet. So when the energetic field of the planet is mismanaged, then this is the issue that ensues. So let's make it very clear here. On the planet, there is a grid called the Hartmann grid. Now, all occultism and those who practice deep levels of occultism know that that's the grid that their intentions travel down. But because you have so many working the craft is basically like a huge blanket. Okay. There's so many working and weaving the craft that craft is sending all the time more negatives and more distorted energies over the heart man grid.
Oh, well,
Okay?
That's pretty powerful. Wow.
Nothing here, and once the code syncs, nothing here is out of place. That's what becomes interesting because, see, once you get to this level, what happens is that the body starts to understand the difference between its past self, which definitely can't be trusted, because everything the past self had to deal with is based on its manifestations, and especially in previous lives. So even some of the craziest stuff, you're like, why did that happen to me? If there's a God, and this is why the gods and external gods are always telling us, if God ever existed, why would he let that happen to me? And the truth is, whether one can handle it or not, I say, you can't handle the truth. The truth is, you did that. If you don't take control over it, it will always run you. But you have to realize that all of the things that you were doing that maybe you didn't even know you were doing. As I say in the Bible, you can sin and not even know you did it. This is because in ignorance, we could do things that start causing these repercussions that we feel like we're being totally abused. And see, that's the past self.
Is this like a software program running in the background? Is it something that we've got in a loop?
Well, that's the difference between a circle and a spiral. See, a spiral can never repeat and go back to the same place that it's been. A circle can do that all the time. So a pie is like a self-replicating worm. It makes everything around you seem like it's different, but it's all made from the prima materia. It's one element. But it was from an artificial element, while phi is made from the original prima materia. And that's why the words seem to be so close together. And because it's a direct plagiarization in every tense to piggyback onto the knowledge of how a world is created by netters or nature. Basically, the forces that are still in nature, they flow. So if you were basically like, imagine yourself as the wind, imagine yourself as the sun, imagine yourself as rain. So you see your whole thing, your whole dynamic is you're in principalities because people need to drink your water. People need your heat. People have to breathe you. You see what I mean? So there's no, hey, I'm the one that's supplying you everything. Could you please give me some reverence? The reverence is in the proof and in the work. That's called no ego. So, this is just, again, the level of what the energetics would consist of and how the energetics on the planet are actually alive. And so people always try to put physical bodies around them and make them humans, but you can see what they really are. Some of them you can't see at all, like wind, but it's moving. But at the same time, you understand then why there isn't really another world, because when you start recognizing those elements, because some people would say, are you talking about that these things are living, breathing entities? And I don't even believe that. And the same people that are saying that are actually the ones that don't take care of nature and actually don't watch out where they're throwing things. So it shows that they're already disconnected from it. That's why they don't believe that it's actually alive. They just think it's an illusion. They think it's, basically, they don't even think about it, right? That's because they are on the program, not to get into too much theys here, but they're on the program of the circle. And in the circle, that's what happens. That's why you see people practice magic. They just in this circling. Mm-hmm. And it's like, what's going on? And it's like, we're working into this. This is what goes on. This is why. It's because the pentagram is a circle. It's not a spiral. And so people who work with that need to realize you're working against nature. But I'll tell you the truth. The people that work in that know what they're doing, and it seems like more of them know than don't, they know they're working for the Lord. You see, this gets really crazy on that end, that the Minotaur in the middle of the maze is the old king. And the old king is not just a male, it's a female, because the word king is basically synonymous with the male-female Cain or Cain, the androgen. Because the first one that came from God, which was Cain, was closest to God. So now you get an understanding about, we're still talking about a pantheism of specific beings. We're not talking about supreme being. Supreme being is the totality of everything completely outside of time. So anyone who's playing around in time is on one of the lower rungs of the hierarchies, and they can masquerade, as we talk about in the book, masquerade around people as if they're more powerful. And it's very easy to do that when you strip a person of all their jewels or all their chakras, basically. This means that what chakras are the developments and the recordings of your experience throughout multiple worlds. That's why they have certain colors and shapes to them. So if the chakra as a jewel becomes plundered and then locked down and closed, then the being doesn't know edgewise. And this is the state that we find the human being. But these kind of tales, once this thing lights up, it's glorious. Somehow it's even an addiction to the game, because the lower it gets and everyone's like, oh, they're trodden right now, right? And then it'll light up. And how it lights up is that when that Becker-Hagen's grid, or excuse me, it's also the Becker-Hagen's, but the Hartman grid is more direct. When it is formed again off of human orgone, the human beings that connect into that network that are balanced, once certain ones start doing that, it's the 100th monkey. It literally starts bringing others into sequence by proxy. They become affected by it. And I kid you not.
Is that because it's a harmonic? Is it's creating a harmonic?
It's the overriding harmonic. It's basically the collapsing of the field. It's the collapsing of the field. It's like the center of the solfeggio is 528 hertz, which is a concave triangle. That concave triangle, when spinning, as you've seen it, it looks like the center of a sunflower. Mm-hmm. That particular pattern right there is actually what you see as you're oscillating through higher frequencies. And the only reason why you're seeing the other things that are on those frequencies is because you have that HUD, which is basically a third eye. All the eyes are merged into one single eye. And then you can see what's exactly, you can see what's on all planes then. As you yourself see, now then you're the Time Lord, because you can oscillate through frequencies to get you to different segments in time. And this is this doesn't last long for those who make it that far, because they leave time. You realize just the whole going back and looking into it. See, because desire is more than just sexual feeling and wanting to have sex with someone. Desire can also be, I want to hurt this person, or I want to get revenge. So when you look at the panorama of your life, if you see a place in there that you want to redo, guess what happens? You plunge back in headlong, fallen angel, back into that part of the timeline, or excuse me, that wavelength, to attempt to correct and change that. And so this becomes a mess, because what happens then is that's how the webs get weaved. It's still an illusion. See, sometimes you just have to smack some people, but man, it's still an illusion. And the more that's happened to them in the illusion, the more that they believe that it's not really an illusion. They don't want to let it go. No, he killed my brother. So do you see what wars do then, to bring it back full circle? What wars do is extend time. Because now that when one spills the blood of another and needs to get revenge, that revenge is a strong enough will to carry him back through the incarnation cycle. And this is why stuff like that, like revenge and all those things, become key components. Hate, very extreme polarities become key components to these worlds, because that's how they function. They need a person to choose. They need a person to judge. Then when someone is judged wrong or judged not worthy by you, you plunge in again. You see, and that's how tricky it is. Like, just in that alone, like, some people have to play that back and listen to it again, but it's such a fine line between the zero and this spiral, or this circle and this spiral. And it's literally all in your perception. So that means that some people can't even understand what I'm saying. Like, first of all, if people think that that's odd, I don't speak Chinese. So right off the bat, unless someone interprets this, I'm not getting to a large chunk of the people. And then we'll throw India in there, because they don't speak English either. So just from that alone, these people don't understand what I'm saying. Now we can even get it even more microcosmic, because if a person's moving on a circle, they're having a hard time following where I'm going, because I'm never going to return. See, like I'm moving in a direction that I won't come back to this anymore. But those who are moving on the circle, because they have revenge, any of the re's, Republicans, return, regress, all the re's,
Yeah.
right?
Got it.
So
Yeah.
they will come back into this time again and animate it. And guess what? There's nothing wrong with that. What the adept knows is that there's nothing wrong or right. That's how they got themselves out of this.
But having said that, the fact that optimistically, we're not dealing with the vast majority of humanity. And I've talked about this for years, that I had to believe that it was not necessary for humanity consciously to change, that it was going to pivot on a very tiny percentage of the human race to make this. What do we call this? I mean, is
Well, I
it
mean,
ascension?
you got it right there. It's just like what you're saying. See, what happened with the world is that you still notice that it takes really, one or two people have invented something, then we're all using it. We see that happening all the time, right? So this is because that's why there's larger stars in that sky. And this is, I like how a movie put this. Some men God builds greater than others. I mean, it's just, this kind of madness. But in division, there is a hierarchy. See, this is where it takes to be adult, because in an adult, which there's not a lot in the New Age movement, when you say, yeah, I think these people are different. Oh, no, brother, we're all the same. Yes, beyond time we are, but here there's a hierarchy, and that hierarchy exists all over the place. It has to do with these frequencies and all this stuff, but we just have to admit that people focus their energy into certain individuals more than they do others. And then they like to call the individuals that they focus the most energy into stars. Right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
that lets us see that what these stars are, because they are containing more parts, not the totality, but more parts, is that they actually become more multifaceted. Like a gem, it has more facets than some of the more denser stones that are rough cut. You see what I mean? So the rough cut stone always aspires to be a trillion cut, right? And so this is still on all levels of the reality, that you can see the same things going on, and how one thing is interacting with another and attempting to be it. Like the dog watching the human these days. Like, you look at this dog, and this dog wants to be a human. This dog will be a human next life. It's just so much in there. It's like man's best friend is right up there next to end up being one of these bodies next, to never figure out just the whole craziness with being in one of these, but he'll figure it out. So what am I actually talking about? That this world, despite what people want to say about it, is going through a progression of fleshly vessels, starting from the bottom all the way to the top. And the eyes are the gateways to the souls of each of these entities, these animals, and these, like you look at the goat. The goat's eyes that's Uranus. The goat's eyes is sidereal. You look at the cat's eyes. The cat's eyes are convex convex oval, and that's, of course, Venus. That's the portal of Venus. So the animals are the portals that the spirit or prima materia is coming through to be formed and fashioned, because now it's being cut, it's being molded. Because you're talking about an element that doesn't have a shape, it doesn't want to take form, it doesn't want to do anything. So how do you get it to do that? Put it into a shape, form, fashioner. And that's what makes the whole body even so incredible, is because it's literally accomplishing cold fusion and hot nuclear fusion. It's accomplishing all these different things. It can distill the seed of a chicken or a piece of chicken into the seed of life. You see what I mean? They take it so all the way through the body. And this is what's seen and known in alchemy, that the real alchemy was plagiarized again, or copied from the body. And it's because the body has all these, they even made the vessels that they were boiling things in the same size and the same shape as parts of our body, to begin to figure out how to distill the seed of life, which is basically a monatomic. It's taking something out of all of its purities, taking it through purgatory. This is where all the purging goes on. And then all of this stuff is boiled off of it with fire. And then what's left, voila, is the original shape, form, and fashion of the, of the energy itself. And then it passes through the envelope. And so this is the interesting part, because when it's passing, I want to be on that. When it's passing, I don't want to be one of the things that get burned off, right? And so this is why we have to live true. Because when we live true, we'll progress and we'll go beyond. When we live in the circle, or we live in the artificial, we'll burn up. And this is like very similar to why the body is actually getting older, why people start losing energy, why they don't feel as motivated as much. And this really has more of the dynamics of the concepts that we've accepted about age, how we overall feel about the reality anyway. Of course, what we're eating, what we are still, what we eat, what we put in these 7 portals, which is the 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 nose, the regulator, which is the mouth. That's why the number 7 was significant, because it was the level of portals to enter into these globes. So when we see the human spirit then as this globe and globulous, some people take pictures of it, they're like, oh, this is the orbs. That has 7 points in it that can be entered. And so life then becomes a quasi-temptation in a certain sense, like tempering the fire, though. To what, are you going to watch this? Are you going to hear this? Are you going to taste this? And that's the experience that we're having. So, of course, if we choose to begin to put into those orifices things that are balanced, or we know how to do the balancing ourselves, because the other thing is that don't think you're going to start running around the reality and just see it all in balance at first. Of course, we don't witness it like that now. It's just understanding how to get the right weights and measures of things, because, of course, a lot of people just want it good. Sometimes I will watch a little Vice News to taper off too much of a goody two-shoe attitude that seems to be growing itself into the consciousness all of a sudden, just to keep it balanced. Like, if some people may not see me necessarily jump for joy, but it doesn't mean I'm happy and not happy. You see what I mean? So it's just, these kind of things. And that's why I was saying, though, now look at all this maintenance. And it's because this body is a child. Like, it needs, step by step, this kind of thing until it actually, goes into its, its next stage of experience. And so, we want to create things that actually allow people to really be able to do that. We want to let them see completely how this is going on in their life, that this story is about them. It's not about numbers. It's not about, entities that live on this plane that are slightly out of the wavelength. It's not, and in any of those cases, it's not directly about this. That. What it's really about is intuitively getting into a person's consciousness at some point, meaning all this stuff is flying around, I'm oscillating through different frequencies until the person makes a phase lock and a match with something that I'm saying. And then they stop listening necessarily to what I'm talking about and just feeling the vibration of my voice. And then once they tap into that, then they actually hear exactly what I'm really saying, which is, look, I can tell you about every single thing that goes on here, but it's very simple. This is still duality, and it's illusion. We already wrote this off, meaning that you understand your experience here. You can be an overachiever. You can do great things. You can even completely awake this world if you have enough. Nobody is telling you that you can't do that, but you will never be able to accomplish that at all until you accomplish it inside. Because what's really happening is what's going on inside is projecting this world. So if we never change the inside, this is like basically trying to change the hologram from inside the hologram. You need to go where it's projecting. And of course, as you know, Randy, it's projecting from the inside. So we need to go into the framework, into the D-base. And also we have to be very innovative, because the innovation is very high these days as far as what exactly is going on. See, people don't get the necessary process of this world as it comes into its awakening, but they just launched and have bought for virtual reality. Virtual reality is going to change everything. They just bought molecular scanners. Handheld molecular scanners are $200 to change everything. Mm-hmm. It brings many of the objects that we use every day to a level so close to sentience. We now need to actually be really concerned about where our consciousness is going, because you're going to be able to directly interact with your consciousness.
Well, this is the future. I mean, Facebook bought Oculus Rift for a reason.
And if you notice, Oculus Rift's symbol is it's a pentahedron. So
I did notice that. Yes.
Yeah, and you get the eyeball, but take the logo. The logo is a pentahedron. And then the whole story. It's strange because again, not to get into this, but the whole story is that they build around these characters that they put up is so fabricated because, these are still the more of advanced structures in the background, just building these new infrastructures to get ready to just continue to usher in the next stage of what they want to do. And if you already look at what's going on in reality, it's clear what they want to do. They want, and it's just not to get into the day, but those who are grounded to the world and want to preserve it for the love of their life, like they talk about in the Matrix, they would kill you over this Matrix. What they want to do is they know about the spirituality, but they want you to not push that energy inside and then realize that your prayers should be to your higher self, because your higher self is definitely there. And then your higher self is going to send that energy back to you stronger. And then what that's going to do is create a line of conductivity between you and your higher self until you merge on all 7 planes. And then what happens is you actually start witnessing yourself going into activation in your dreams. It's like you see people and then you're talking to people and then all of a sudden you start activating, and then you start flying. And then you get the reaction from those beings that are there that you're the first person that started flying. Once you get enough of that kind of frequency and you understand how to bring that frequency into this world, man, like it takes longer when dealing with time. This is instantaneous because it involves outside of time, right? So somebody say, well, how long is it going to take? Well, when it happens, it will be in a twinkling of an eye. Make no mistake. It's like, it's catchy. And I experienced this in the room. It's just like, there's some early bloomers hanging around. I'm just one of them. The vibration, when it comes through, all of a sudden you can't stop it. And then you just lose consciousness. And then and for me personally, I went and I came back. It was just too early. But what you start seeing, if you can't control yourself, is just this white field. And it's just so white and bright. And then all of a sudden you can't think anymore. And this is called the merge. And it's because that state of consciousness, and let me show you how you save your consciousness with dealing with those kind of energies, is you don't see yourself as separate. It's only when, you're thinking, oh my goodness, it's God. Oh my God, I can feel it. Oh my goodness, it's too much. And all of those manifestations are what's actually causing the unit to get ready to short out. It's going to burn out through fear. But notice through arousal, which is basically, oh my goodness, it's finally here, my higher self, which is basically the sound of creation. So at that point, something new is created. What was created? This new stage of consciousness that you're going to be in once you are not in fear of jumping over what is death, the invisible plane, right? They say in the between of the tree of the Sephiroth, there is an invisible space, right? Mm-hmm. Yes. That's called the abyss or ibis. Right. Ibis is thoth or thought. This is the person that they're right before about to activate, and they're just scared as hell. The mind or thought is going nuts. Oh, we're going to die. How do you know? Something else. And then, see, the able side of your consciousness is familiar with trust. So the one who leaps the abyss actually has trust that the only thing that's on the other side is just them, not Archon, not Dweller, not some boogeyman, because if that's the case and you start manifesting that, you fall into the abyss. Now, if a person falls into the abyss, that looks like crazy here on this planet. Because where the person is now is they're so lost in thought, they can't actually anchor themselves to either part of the reality. So do you see why the books were kind of closed on consciousness and spirituality for a while? Because so many people taking a leap and using the back door, which is when you use certain substances, or there's a backdoor state of consciousness, but using that route in order to get into altered state of consciousness, but then not being able to shut that route off. Like, let's say, for instance, the person takes a certain substance, like, let's say a mushroom, and they pop 5 mushrooms. Mm-hmm. And then right at a certain point where it's no longer, it's, but they can't get out of it because their frequency personally is no longer, their personal frequency is no longer controlling where they are. The mushroom is. So what the front door is the front door is breathing. Because there's a way, and there's a specific technique, and it's, it's dynamic. Like, I definitely got to get into doing a video about this technique because I just recently learned it from a very good gentleman that sat down and was able to teach it to me. But this technique, within 3 or 4 breaths, you realize, as the guy said, look, you got to take the front door, because if you're the heir to the throne, and no heir to anything or the king comes through the back door of his own house. Okay? And this is the back door. Again, we can get in deeper about what the back door really is, but you can just imagine you own the house, but you keep coming through the back door. This means that you're not facing all of who's working in the house. So all the entities that were used to build the temple are still working in the house and have taken over the house. So you know enough about the biblical tradition. What did Solomon use to build the temple when he built the temple?
Demons.
He used demons, exactly.
Yeah.
So just right there is letting
Something
you know.
that the Christians, they really don't want to hear.
Well,
that,
they take it
but-
externally.
Yeah.
It goes all external because it's all fear-based. So the first thing they want to bring is one of these ugly monsters out. But remember, it's because they're running from the ugly monster within. And that's really what you get, is that even with eating certain foods and things, it puts other kind of entities inside the person's body. So the last place they want to go is there. So that's why the judgment thing in Christianity is so heavy, because they become what they call the chosen. It's like the whole fucking thing is really designed wicked. If you think about it, it says, because the only thing that you really want, if you really want to judge, like if some bad stuff happens to you in life, and then you really, really feel like you're not getting the best of life, the real thing that you want to do is you want to jump into a real judgment seat and judge somebody else. But first you got to follow certain criteria. And this is when you become chosen and you've now elected to be of the saints. And so you get this template. And then the template, as long as you act like the template, then supposedly you're judged to be saved. So this means that you can enslave others. And that's really what you get. It's just a back and forth volley. Even it's going on even in the church. Oh, Sister Teresa thinks that she actually understands the spirituality, and those are not even real tongues. And oh, Brother Deacon, I can't wait till he releases his position so I can go ahead and get into the front of the church where I need to be. And then, that's one side.
This is the exact system that I came out of.
Oh, man.
Yes.
But see, that's what it's out. It's out, right? So when you get out of it, you're escaping the prison. See, prison, pre-Zion, okay? So in escaping the pre-Zions, because basically those become the Zionic worlds. And this is why this word is key, this Zion, because that's the God of the priory of Zion, and that's the God of the scientists. And see, remember, what are they doing? They're recreating. So they can recreate and make a god or a Tron. And we're going to call him Sion. And he's going to be a Time Lord. And then they just start making it up from there like it's just a Marvel comic or something. And then they embed or program that into everyone's database using zeros and ones. This becomes the robots' rebellion. Choice. Do you want A or B? Republican or Democrat? Reptile or demon? You see? And then after a while, it's only because people think it's a game, it still becomes a game. Because what is a game? There's 2 sides, red and blue, right? So as long as that's going on, the duality in a person's mind, they think it's a game. And then since it's a game, what does the game mean? It's not really real. So no lies have gone on here. It's an illusion. You see what I mean? So because the game is not real. This is not the real one. It's the game. When we get to the other one, that's when it's real. So then there's the next stage, and this is how the language is encoded. A person has to realize. A good friend of mine brought this up. Realize.
Realize. Yeah.
Well, look at it. What is so much? That's an oxymoron. How are we going to realize? Lies are fake. But
What about real eyes?
The real eyes are based on when a person looks with these 2 eyes and attempts to interpret something that's already a lie, and then tell someone else what they found. Look, It's hydrogen 3.
It's a synthesis.
Exactly. So it's a self-replicating virus of corruption in a sense. It's a corruption in the program. But remember, let's not blame nature for this because they ran it so close to running close to 5. Nature, woman, gets blamed for this by most people going through spiritual progresses because they start thinking it's the earth. Because the circle that's been created, 3.14, looks so much similar, but it's so artificial. But people that are hooked onto the Pi system the Pi system can't tell the difference. So then they start attacking the earth, even subconsciously. Do you think the earth wants to be around losers? People that think low all day of themselves as wretches, because that's going to rub off on everyone. Like, I'm an earth, I'm a planet, and you get a bunch of people in a room with me that, just are not up for the task and they're all non-motivated. I start getting non-motivated, right? Then I start to go to sleep a little bit. I nod off at 23.5 degrees and basically my spin slows down. Right? Because think about what's happening. Even when you're aroused, your spin speeds up. And some people think of the arousal as just all sexual. It's not just that. It's tapping into the energy that is even beyond sexual to realize that we have a love for one another. And that love is very strong. And it many times, especially when you're looking into a person's eyes for a prolonged period, you start to cry. Like if anyone starts to cry, it just becomes wet works. Everyone starts to cry. Why? Because Phi is fire. So everyone is, if you see them on the spiritual plane, they're like a flaming fire, like a fire body. They need water so bad to rain on their seeds. The moment that someone starts to cry, it's just water going everywhere because that's the watery principle of the body. So, of course, some people are a little bit too much water. They're crying all the time. So do you see, though, the fair balance of these energies, not too much fire, where you're lashing out and angry about things, but also not too much water where you have no desire and no passion to actually go and really triumph through this, which is basically steam. Steam will rise. That is the connection between the two. And that's why this thing will keep going. You don't be looking for this to stop unless it stops with inside of you. Because what you're asking to do is basically stop the entire process of how the universe always worked. Universe. United together in conflict. Verse. Because that's what the whole thing was with each frequency is battling to be what it is. And then there's the shore, basically the point where it cuts off and then another frequency starts. And those become the boundaries. Those become the laws. Those become the rules. And that actually creates time. And that's why they were saying in the book of Enoch, I'm not sure if it mentioned it directly there. Yeah, it did. That the angels basically binded and drew lots over the earth. That basically this belongs to me. I'm America. And this, I'm Russia. And they drew these territories.
Powers, principalities, and strongholds, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thrones.
That constantly are in the Phi-based war with each other to see who's going to be the Lord of the Ring. Because the ring is the circle. So it's like, well, who's going to rule the circle? And they say that the circle is so finite now, meaning so they've gotten some kind of order within the circle, that the zodiac is that circle. So when that 1,000 years is over for that one house, they just basically pack up all the stuff and move out. And then whoever's turn it is next, and maybe Leo, comes in and then starts it all over again. And then meanwhile, you got the people on the surface still talking about, we just want a better world. No.
It's kind of like a cosmic timeshare system, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you can see the light on. It's like, everything that's about it, like even your currency, your energy, you can get bills for, how much currency you're actually burning. There could be a broker, something that actually brokers your energy with other forms that don't need as much energy and basically broker you out, Well,
this is what's going on. I mean, you just hit on the nub of the thing. And again, not using days, pointing fingers, but there's this creepy verse in Revelation chapter 17 where it lists all the riches of the world, the cinnamon, the gold, the silver, da-da-da-da-da-da. It goes down this whole list, and at the end it says, and the souls of men. And every time I read that for years,
it's like, well, how did that get on the list?
I'm like, holy shit.
Yeah.
This is a commodity.
Yeah, because somebody was sitting back there, but like, you know, as the guy is writing, maybe Shakespeare's writing, and, you know, somebody who knows poetry.
Francis, Bacon, whatever.
Whoever knows poetry, because they're poets. That's the poet or the pope. Okay, so they write paper. They deal with paper. So it's at the end, they're like, okay, so this and this and that. That's the sevenfold spirit, right? So they name all this stuff and this and this and this, and then somebody just says, and the souls of men. Master, are you sure? Yeah, it's the end of the book. You know, but again, all still serving a purpose, though, because whoever can make it out of this machination, this crucible, will be 1,000 times stronger. Because that's what a crucible is. This is an alchemical treaty here. And so the work that's being performed on these seeds is an alchemical process. So if you make it beyond, you actually go monatomic. You go back into the single form of yourself. And like I said, we found elements that can be taken into this stage. What we do is that we just look for the greatest levels of resonators of this. And I kid you not, I'm just mentioning this now, but I'm going to make a video of this. I actually today watched water communicate with other water that wasn't in the same bowl. And I have a tester, which is a real piece of equipment, a Hanna tester that tests ORP and it tests pH. And I can literally show how when adding an element to it, that basically lowering the ORP is actually increasing the energy in the water. I can increase the energy of the water, and then in this other water, it's not increased yet. But within a short period of time, without adding the element that increases the energy in the water, the other water increases the energy right on the meter, proving that the water even has some level of communication where we already know this, but this is now, it's made manifest. Like, see, there's a difference between the knowledge because, see, humans are storytelling people, so we get really off on these stories. We can eat this stuff. And this is why you have to understand that even the phantoms, the other beings on the other planes, they just to hang out in a bar. See, if a man drunk all of his life, he severs the line between his higher consciousness and his lower body until he becomes completely lower body. So when he dies, he actually feels his whole death process and even the involvement. And then he raises out another shell because he's still his idea. So the ether gathers around this idea and forms another shell that looks like him, but it's a phantom. And he moves about as a phantom looking for what it was that he was attracted to in this life. And he finds a bar because he, in the inhalation of those fumes alone, can become as if he was drunk again. Why? It's the same way that if you take someone away for a long time from something that they like, let's say, for instance, for man and woman, for heterosexual male, take them away from woman for a long time, even a picture, even a whiff, is just going to totally be like the real thing for that person because they put themselves through so much aestheticism or denial of it that even just having the frequency of it resonate somewhere is enough. And that's the same way a phantom moves. So this is why, you know, anytime you get certain elements around, because they're resonating a specific frequency, they are going to attract because that same frequency is how that whole embodiment is even happening in the first place. And so when you know this, and this is not something seen with the physical eye, but definitely seen with the third eye, when you know this, you move in an entirely different way. You already kind of, you know, of course you would want the eye open, but the reality is that for those who don't have that luxury right about now, you can really listen to how your body works to understand also how this other vapor, more like plane, works. And this is also the space. That's purgatory. And it's a real thing. It's just basically when a person doesn't know how to get beyond the gate because the dweller is there, which is their judge. They're judging themselves, saying everything in their mind that they wish they could change or they think is wrong about them. Maybe if I was a little skinnier. Maybe if I was more dashing. You know, all of that, they send you back. It sends you back. It sends you back. Who's doing it? You. Because this same knowledge is known about. If you don't even like certain sounds in this reality, because we can become very peculiar. then when you leave and you start reforming your body again to get ready to make your next entry, you even form your ear canal a little bit different so that way you can tune out that sound. That's how much, because people don't realize their power, but you can see what I'm talking about. You're manifesting the build of your next incarnation still, and it's based on what you really thought you wanted to be in this incarnation, because you didn't get happy. You didn't settle. You felt like something else would have made you happy. So as a real creating being, which we are, we can create babies. All this stuff I'm dropping is factual. So we create another body and we give it another run again. But here's also the tricky part, because there's a more larger wheel. During this zodiac sign, I guess they say, let's say it's Aquarius. So there's a certain thing that everyone is really aspiring to. There's even a certain color right now that you start seeing all the websites are changing this color to the same color. A lot of stuff's coming out this color because that's the color of this particular time. Mm-hmm. So then if you base yourself, like, let's say, you're moving on the slow coggle 72-year Shimham Faresh lifestyle. And then what ends up happening is that you finally figure out by the time you're about 70 what you really want to be. But now age is upon you. And then what you really want to be is still based on the criteria of a Siam-based world. But when you come back, it's not going to be that house anymore. Because everyone gets to come back in when the house opens up again, the light turned back on, right? But it's a different time. So guess what? Most people incarnate as something that is not even in style anymore. But meanwhile, the sequentials, which are like the lamas, whoever's the ones that are holding the active position of ruler, and they have them in each spectrum. There's a Chinese one, there's a Asian one, or black one. There's all spectrum of the 9 colors. So you see what it means? So that's the grand wheel. And that's why
you just called them sequentials. What does that mean?
Sequentials are professional reincarnator. See, because you can actually, you can come out of your body, like they call it OBE. But, it's a lot more, there's a lot more advancement to that. You can actually learn how to get out of your body. And it's really easy when you understand how to relax. And then so most people know that when they try to get out of their body, when they start to get ready to get out, they get tensed up and scared, and then it goes back down the frequency. And so when you know how to relax, then you can actually get out of the body. So there are those that know how to get out of the body and also know a lot more about the dynamics of the plane that is the one that's right next to this one. So what I'm saying is that still understand. A lot of people think that if they get into this next world, which is the astral plane, and they learn everything about what's going on in the astral plane, that now they're going to figure it all out. But see, that's what happened here too. We thought that when we got into this world and we learned everything about it, like scientists really claim to know now, all the information that we have, that it's going to make everything better, but it didn't change anything. You see what I mean? Like, we know all this stuff now. Has that made things better? No, now we got quantum problems. Some people, they know the change, but they're greedy. So they don't want to teach everyone else to change because they want to stay changed and into this other frequency that's slightly higher than where everyone else is, so they could be the ruler. So now we got another problem that's caused by something else. You see what I mean? So I call this peace, because what peace is not the whole thing. It's basically, oh yeah, we're all going to be together after this next war. And it's like the whole embodiment of what the United Nations has going on in a certain sense, because they constantly launch off into these countries talking about they're going to do peace, and then they accomplish that. But people need to understand the trickery with the words is the P.
Yeah, well, they call their soldiers peacekeepers, which is a complete oxymoron.
Yeah, it's all oxymoron. And then to understand how they play with the energies, the reason why there's such an embodiment now of the whole ISIS thing is because they don't care, and here we go with they again, but the energetic principles of the planet, that's how it's being constructed, the elements it's being constructed with now, don't care they just want your spike. So if it's complete hate or complete love, they just want one of those two. So to roll the name ISIS, which is the $sign, is a symbol of current or currency, as the now evil, right, is another move to drive more energy into the system, even especially the financial system and how that functions working with people's currency. Because all that hatred being pushed into that icon can be harnessed. It's like a valve you can open up if you understand, the hyperdimensional reality and the metaphysics. The valve can just be opened up because whoever owns that, whoever is marketed or branded that name, whoever has that obelisk basically, can channel that energy. It's just simple. It's like working with metal, working with steel, but it's just working with another element because people's energy become congealed or jailed into that, that particular form. And, they call that an eidolon. And to tell you the truth, that's what probably 95% of most of these entities are made up of. It's just ideas. But once the people put collectively idea together, idea is almost like this element of light, okay? And then what ether does, because ether's always moving through, ether's like stardust, is it starts sticking to that idea. So what the idea is almost like in itself a ship. And then
So this is where you get to worship.
Exactly, the warship.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then so the ether begins to build up around this, like barnacles build up on the bottom of a boat. And pretty soon you got the big barnacle man. So what I'm basically saying is that humans can be formed from a word. And that's why I say in the beginning there was a word. What was the word? Well, I'm not going to say what the word is on air, but it was a specific word. And then what it created was a phi-based body that was known as man. And that first man was pissed. No, he was really pissed because it came from non-limited to limited. And it burned with fury. And this is the beginning of this world. Like the beginning of this world is actually with the being that is highly upset about coming into physicality, just like any spirit will be when they come into physicality. And you can ask people, maybe not want to talk to the Goetian people because they're like cell phones for the spiritual world. Everyone wants one. So you have to be careful. So the reality is, though, is in Goetics, you understand it is that, and you could just take my word for it, that when you bring a being from through the ethers, it burns them to be here. So they're never happy when they get here. Because why would you be happy if you come from limitless into limitation? It doesn't, even the whole concept of happy have to be learned.
Well, so you're saying this is an involuntary manifestation, incarnation?
Well, I can't say. There's always an initial emission, also known as the Big Bang. But the reality is now it's based now on choice, that people are coming in and out of these incarnations through the desires. See, what the desire is, remember we said it doesn't have to just be sexual, but it means the incarnation that's going to be most likely to you fixing whatever you thought was the problem, whatever you judged to be the problem. So when the two that come together that can actually get you closer to that wavelength of where you need to be, this is mother and father. When they come together, then they go into friction. And then they generate this light. You can see it from a great distance on the spiritual plane. And that light, though, is a specific hue, because that's what's going to create this specific human. And so when that light's that specific hue, what we see as the idea of the person flies into that etheric cloud and takes on that mantle, and it basically becomes a seed in the mother's womb. And it's going to its reincarnation process. So remember, I'll reiterate that again. It's very clear. When you leave out of the body, you hang out in the cut. This is basically the corner or the oob of the reality. And this is also AKA purgatory. So in purgatory, either things get purged off, which is a choice, or you're looking for another incarnation. In Cars, which means flesh, in those who consume flesh. Her nation, meaning her place. Okay? So that's where the Kali comes into this. Okay? So the person then is scoping for those enveloped in desires, because that's where you find the people who are about to go into friction. And then the order out of that chaos is the person being able to embed themselves into basically that person's field so that they can be born. So I'm telling you how people try to get to lives that they feel like will get them to the next level of their consciousness based on lights that are never the same color. And let me tell you why these colors are so rare. Because even those two people that unite, there's so many things that are also external to them in their environment, lights, drinking, all sorts of things, that they reach a specific frequency that night that can never be done again. It's like, because these are still phi-based beings, they're spirals. So they'll never return to that point again. It's impossible. How are you going to get those 3 crickets? How are you going to get that smoke alarm that kept beeping? How are you going to get that bad Atlas refrigerator you had? All of those frequencies are combined in with those two beings as they're coming into this, communion to make this light that another being is going to fly right into, because that light is like a fire. This other being is going to fly into it and reincarnate into that, starting from a seed all the way up. And then again, the terminology behind this is to understand this is Mary. So from the maritime law, you come from the ocean, which is space. Then you come up onto the shore, which is earth. Then the dock, which is the doctor, is there to actually issue you a certificate for your vessel, which is this body. And then from that point, you're no longer a sovereign, because you've accepted that someone else is in rulership. In God we trust. So from that point, the trust, and this gets into sovereignty, in the straw man, the trust is started. But see, these people keep trying to attack it from a legal end. You need to go to galactic court. And you need to have Jehovah and Lucifer there, which are actually inside of your body. And then also Cain and Abel, who are still sitting in the temples. And then you have to bring them all in there and tell them that they're not going to be judged. So people, they don't even get this, what I'm talking about, but some people do. But basically, all of this stuff that we keep, everyone, the Illuminati and all these people are not worth your stardust. So it's an illusion. Let it go. And if you can't let it go, then that means we need to keep developing something else to cut you out of the web. And what it looks like, if you want to know when you come away from it, is like a yarn ball. You got webs on top of webs. That's why on the front door of the Bohemian Grove, spiders weave not thy webs here. Right. Because it's the knowledge that you can weave a web, like companies, they call them entities, right? Let's form this entity. He becomes a corp, standing upright, a corporation, a corpus. And then from that point, all the currency, even down to the elevators, everything becomes an archon. Like the big AT&T building in Atlanta is one of the chief archons. He's made of the elements that the archons gravitate towards, which is the minerals, because they're all from the Saturnalian kingdom. They all remember themselves as when they were noble. But again, so that's
the shining one.
Exactly, that whole thing. But like knights now, gray, with shells around them so they can't feel. They call that actually Chigadil in Hebrew, which means the world of the shells and the excrement, meaning they feed on the excrement. This is like low energy feeding on low energy. Why? Yeah. See, so that's what we got here.
Shaitan, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I gotta pause here for a second and say,
got to blew past the half.
That was amazing that you riffed through all of that. But the whole incarnation thing kind of left me going, wow, there's not a whole hell of a lot of romance in any of this, is there?
Well, I mean, if you make it, I mean, you get beautiful children. Like, see, the thing is that, it's about, see, what's going to happen is, and this will clear it all up for you. See, if we don't see the children, especially our children and then other people's children, if we have to go through another incarnation because there's just more to learn, as the portal that we're going to be coming through, then we miss the point. Because the most powerful thing that you can really do here is create a child. And that's why there's so many children that go unkept. It's just like ideas unkept. And this is God's plight. Okay? If you want to know God's problem, and that's why God's always trying to get someone to take his job or its job. And it's because children, you have all of these creations and manifestations that you must stay back for and walk through. Mm-hmm. And that's what keeps you in a circle. So that's why they call him Father Time. So it's literally where you have to walk your creation through, because remember, if you want to take responsibility in a certain tense, and I'm not saying anyone should, especially don't throw on the mantle on yourself if you can't carry the world atlas, don't pick it up. So what happens is that still, as a creator, you want to basically look out for your creations, and you want to actually bring your creations into perfection, the same way that you would want to raise up and rear a child in the way it should go, right?
Right.
So the world, in a certain sense, is that constant attempting to basically make the best out of it based on what's going on. But then it really becomes where, if not everyone is tending the garden, which is the situation, then now we got thorns growing up all over the thing. And then the only thing that the thorns are basically even more premature children. It's like the babies that are forgotten of and forgotten about. Yeah. And that's, of course, the icon of Yaldabaoth as a child. And that's why in the paintings in the Roman, they get the child dancing all around, and that's Yaldabaoth. And it's known as the child because when it was brought into the world, it went into fury because it didn't know where it came from. And then when trying to be explained by its mother that it came from a word, a frequency, it didn't believe it. And so basically the mother, which is nature, has all these frequencies. Like you see all these frequencies, water frequency, earth frequency, and try to explain to Yaldabaoth, it was the same. And Yaldabaoth was like, no, I'm not so, I'm not this, I'm made of smokeless fire, blah, blah, and whatever could be invented. And so at that point, it grew up outside. And that's why it says he was outside of the garden, Cain. Cain is Yaldabaoth. He grew up outside of the garden, cast away, right, from the garden. The garden is obviously mother, the womb, nature. So you would be dealing with then the child that hasn't had a mother, which is how the Gnostic tradition actually begins to explain it and why this being is so. So then we shouldn't take that, though, as just some being that 60,000 years ago that's still floating around time. We should take that as all the children in this world that have no mothers, or that feminine, warm water energy, and they're just burning with fire. And so when their collective frequencies come together, they embody the snake and the lion, because that is the zoomorphication, meaning the actual energetic principles that are encrypted within nature of how that being feels. You see what I mean? So Earth gets very complex. And that's why I was telling people, also remember, like, it's really also about you expanding yourself and getting to the stage of expansion, because many people will run the cycle and make it out of this cycle, but also making it your personal responsibility to take everyone outside the cycle. We talked about this earlier. You're trying to change other people's minds. You can work in that, meaning you can work with this consciousness and then start spreading consciousness just as soon as it comes from you. But judging people, because how do you know they're going up, and how do you know they're going down if you don't have a third eye? You need to know where they came from first. If it was a pig first and it's now a man, looks like progress. But if it was an angel or an elven with 7-pointed star with 2 wings off his back, and then now he's been grounded, looks like we need to make a U-turn. So, but to judge, you would need to know. So that's synonymous with is
judge righteous judgment, which means you would have to have the full scope, the full view, the full context in order to be able to make any kind of reasonable assessment.
And that's all we're talking about. And more directly, we're talking about reasonable assessment of self. Like, instead of everyone else and all the other deities, because it takes to be lofty to get to seeing what's going on there, it's just the judgment of self, because what we start realizing as the whole thing rolls back up, as I said, the tapestry is woven on the opposite side of the rug. When you turn it over, that's really what you're looking at. So in our world, you may think a lot of that stuff that you were doing that's like the opposite side of the tapestry, when you flip it over, there's a whole nother action going on and something completely being designed that you didn't understand was going to be that beautiful. And this is just how it is. Like, the only thing that will want us to deny something like that is something that's still in division. And that's why they call it the devil. So what happens now is that you have to realize, not you personally, but out there, grace is sufficient. What does this mean? This means that basically that when that was spoken, Paul was going through this issue, and it was actually a sexual problem if you have the rest of the text. And he was burning with passion, and then he went and did something. I don't know. It excluded that in this particular metaphor. But the response was, because Paul was like, I can't control it. And it's like, my grace is sufficient. And this is not a path to go and do whatever you want to do. But if you're trying to get into being a purist, you're in a trap. If you're trying to be a light sider, white sider, you're in a trap. Yeah. Don't get into these kind of games with, this kind of planet about judging yourself, et cetera, et cetera. Just progress. And then you'll find is that most of this stuff, and that's why I say it's Cain and Abel in the temple. It's all just like the devil and the angel on the shoulders. It's all going on really in the mind, but there's little progress. And that's why the DNA, of course, is up to more progress and still trying to triumph into its next stage, while the mind is still thinking about what it wants to become. And this is why we have to really get in synchronization, because, the mind can subject to be surprised. And this is why, if you think about it, most people don't really anticipate they're leaving the planet. And this is because we get up every morning. And that's the first part of the whole trick, is that as you keep getting up every morning, you just assume you're going to keep getting up every morning until that day you don't get up, right? So this is where we have to realize, if you're in time at all, then this already means there's no time left. And I always say that not in attempts to, get people scared and they're rushing around, but really, homie, there's no time. So if somehow you found yourself inside of it, you need to work rapidly as possible as you can right now to get out of it. And we pumped a hole in the envelope. And I think that that's really what the code of the matrix really was. And I'm sure there was a lot of synchronistic people around the world doing the same thing, but there was this massive awakening at that one point where everyone realized that they were in this circle. And this happens through deja vu. I think deja vu is more of a Venusian word about something else. But basically the deja vu is when you realize that you're in this circle and you're like, whoa, wait a minute, something's going on. I came around this point before, but it doesn't look the same. Of course it doesn't look the same, because it's all moving on different wavelengths.
No, this is what I was talking about when I was talking about loops and time loops and things. You pass through an experience that's vaguely familiar, even incredibly familiar, but it's not quite the same. It's not like you try to use language to explain things like this. It gets lost in a translation. You know what I mean.
Yeah, for sure. I know what you mean. But it's a puff. It's smoke and mirrors. That's like I said, look, man, on the other side of the mirror, there is really another world, man. This mirror will pop. And you just got to know how to pop it, because when you pop it, you pop your pineal gland. And then from that point, you see the world as it really is. And that begins the adventure. Like it just basically things start there, because now you're seeing true. So there's like now all sorts of waves of energy hitting you, though, because like now you have to be very grounded in a certain sense, because you're just a boat getting tossed about a large ocean with huge cephalopods in there, I might add. These little chthonic creatures running around too, that are just vast states of consciousness that can easily envelop you if you're fascinated too much. And this is why we have to understand in our reality is that, you want to choose good mentors. There's nothing wrong with mentors, but to get drawn and enveloped within something's auric field that is not delivering to you, or at least cycling the energy with you, it is what it is. And that's why, a lot of things it's just very direct. It's just things like democracy, which is basically that you can, you're supposed to be correct all the time, and that you're not supposed to say things at certain times if certain people are there, and basically all these rules. And remember, who handles the rules? The judge. And that's how it works in reality. You break a rule, you go see the judge. So then the judge, not knowing anything about you, you don't know me, homie. Like, man, my life was shit. And my mom, this, foster homes, molestation, blah, blah. So when you're asking me why I'm out here and why I'm hustling, you probably need to be asking me why I'm not out here hustling if you understand my path. But this judge comes and judges without knowing this person's path at all, and just judge them on the moment. But
right, and that's legalism.
And that's legal. And why is it legal, though? It's legal because we do it too. We are the Illuminati. Exactly. People need to understand this, that they're like baby Illuminatis. It may not be to the magnitude of
at a higher level,
right, Ordinati or Intrepidity.
On the 33rd throne.
Exactly. I mean, it's degrees of their own spirit.
Yeah.
So if they do the degree of what they really are, like let's say they only have 3 degrees of human left. So you do 3 degrees of Illuminism, or basically capitalizing on someone else based on their downfall, then you're the same as a person at 271 degrees, which is only a few people that can hold that position, and still not bringing it completely 360 degrees. And this is, of course, why the Course Seeker Society's knowledge, all that's measured in degrees. Fire and heat and temperature is measured in degrees, because it's all about how much energy can you take. But there's never an idea of getting to 360 degrees. Even the masters in the masonry say that the higher degrees, which go all the way up, they say to 360 degrees, but those are not filled. So I would tell people to understand that the greatest positions in a tense, there's no one there. Because they said, well, there's no one great. That's the last thing that the book said. They demoted everybody. There's no one great. There's only one that's great. And it's really a metaphor. It's telling you until we all come together, there will be no greatness. You may hit 290 degrees on the arc, but it's not 360 degrees. You didn't close it. So thus, you don't have the cable, you don't know the cabal, and you definitely don't have the ring. And so that's the craft. You see what I mean? So it's like a disc. It's DVD or David. It's a disc-shaped flying saucer of a reality or a projection that's built on an Abrahamic or Brahmic tradition, entities so vast that they can encase every single kind of thing you want to split yourself up to inside of their minds, which are very developed. So think about it. But the only way to get beyond that is to tap into totality. You see what I mean? So in this, if one takes this projection and they say, well, all I want to be is this guy named James running around this reality. I want some fast cars, pretty women, blah, 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 blah. A Tron will be like, done. We got him sold. Let's go ahead and get him in for 500 shares of kilojoules on currency, and let's remove that 5th chakra. Next. You see what I mean? It'll be a transferring of the person, because what did the person do? They sold out. They sold their soul. They asked for something that was less than what they really were. So that's why the whole thing is just to get a person to choose. Judge, why don't you? Red Nikes, blue Nikes. You want to be the queen? See, because what happens is when you start passing the cards back, as 52 cards come out, that's 52 weeks in a year. When you start passing the cards back, they deal another hand. Another hand, 5 fingers, a pentagram. Okay? So another hand, let me give you 5 cards. Surely we're going to poke her. So let's call his bluff. You say you're out, you don't want any more, royal flush. Now look at you. You're going to win this hand. But, of course, if there's a winning, now you're back in the game, because there's always a loser. So that's how it works in the mind. I'm just showing people how this works in the mind, how the mind keeps taking the bait. And that's why the word, let's see, it's JC, okay, this code. Man, we're tracking this code across the cosmos. Julius Caesar. Right? John Carter, Jesus Christ. Why are all these enigmatic characters? Why are they using that code for enigmatic characters? Because in a C, all you need is a J. A J is a hook.
Right.
With a J inside of a C, there's endless fishing. So that's how these words are coded, is they're coded in ways that there's words that feel to a person more like that's what's going to get them to a certain level. And so that's why, I was watching, how these codes work. And these, I've been doing that for years, and I finally put it away. The numbers were getting numbing. I put the words back onto numbers. And then once I started seeing the codes and the numbers, I started bringing numbers back forward and then seeing how the numbers were tied in. And then once I finished that whole class, I started realizing that the actual symbols in physics and in math were all occult symbols. And so I reverse engineered all those symbols. Oh, that's mind-numbing. And then I finally got to the point where realizing all of it was based on the pi. And then from that point, I was able to collapse it in the pyramid. I mean, you put it all back into a prism or prison by creating a diagram in my mind that basically just says 2, 0, 1. 2, meaning on the left, on the bottom right side of the pyramid is the number 2, because that is the duality. And we talked about that earlier. On the left side, although it may look like one has finally made it, that's the 0, because it is the wholeness. It's the point where you leave out of the piece, but you actually still haven't found totality. So if we're going to mark these as real points on the map, we need to mark them properly. And then finally, those are the 2 bottom parts. Those are the ones always going back and forth with each other, and duality is a further microcosm of that same thing. But as you move up, like the pyramid, you're coming into that point. Now look how these creatures have done it. They move the point off of the bottom of the pyramid, and then that creates a trapezoid, meaning on the dollar bill, the all-seeing eye is slightly raised above the bottom part, right? And then what that shape is, when you remove the cap of a pyramid, it's called a trapezoid. Okay? And it's called that for a reason. And it's because, exactly, because the person becomes trapped. They no longer understand the way back to oneness. And then they make oneness Isis, which is in God they trust. Who's the God they trust? Isis, the dollar sign. Mash all the S's together and the 2 I's, then it becomes the dollar sign, right?
Wow.
And then in the ancient tradition, see, in Kim, everyone was told about this. Ra gave his name to Isis while he was drunk. This is a reflection, again, of even the Hindu tradition where Indra, who's Ra, was in there drunk. And then Isis, which is basically the current, right, the artificial current of the world, stole the name of creation, meaning took the pattern of fire, the spiral, and created a circle, and then told everyone it's the same thing. And that's why Isis is as you see with Madame Blavatsky and all the rest of the traditions, man, they're all in it, man. Like I watch them, sometimes I'm in the different places, people don't know who I am, but I watch them. And I watch their practice, and it's so redundant. It's like basically when you get to the higher levels of spirituality, everyone's in the same club, and they all work for this one entity.
Yeah.
And then that same entity, whether it's living or not, because people have now put so much energy into it. Like it's when you do a ritual is basically solidifying several times and creating an energy signature that can be entered throughout time. So basically when someone says a certain ritual in a certain place, and then they do something like some kind of sacrifice or whatever, what this looks like on the astral plane is you can keep seeing that scene over and over and over and over again. It's hard to get it to fade away. While other things that have been done in those same areas that didn't leave really that much energetic signature, somebody walking through there or whatever, you can't really see it at all. So this is very important to understand, because how these nets and things are developed is going into place, or can envelop and get around you, is going into places where these kind of rites have been said. Now, I'm not saying that nothing's off limits and we need to be afraid of things, but I'm saying make sure you have your vibration together so that you can vibrate off these vampires, because they can't stand in the face of the sun, which is androgynous. Like this whole sun thing is another twist in the language. Obviously, the sun is not a male or female. If anything, it's both. It's figured out how to merge those 2 properties together and to become a dynamo. So even saying it's the sun is automatically making it a male, thus deactivating everyone. That's the knowledge of On, the god of Heliopolis. Because if you notice, On is what you do when you turn your light on. On. On is how you really pronounce it. On. So those who have been under the control of On, in that zone, basically, actually become darker and darker over time because they're under the rulership of a sun. And if you think that is a joke, go get some tan, which actually is the other word for serpent. But basically, if you're under a sun for a long time, you get darker and darker and darker.
Right.
And then this is how it piggybacks into the Christian tradition, and then you really see the identity of the sun as actually where Christ becomes the Antichrist, just like he said. He said, when I leave, there's going to be one that comes right after me. He's going to say he's me, but don't believe him. You will no longer find me externally, but within. What's being said? Basically, the invention of the Bible and external Christ is taking away from the knowledge. That's the Antichrist, because Christ is, of course, Kundalini. So
and it's a black book.
Oh yeah, and it's a Bible. A Bible is the great two-horn, dual quaternain, meaning Alexander the Great, Constantine, the one with the sword. All of them were embodied by the same entity that even possessed Julius Caesar, because there's no one in power that is not tried. And this is what the whole thing with the Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane, and then the devil shows up. This is a metaphor for when you are just about to get to that next stage, as we talked about with the passing of the next card of a royal flush. Something comes and says, but you can have all of this. Because, one that's about to escape out of billions that don't is a lot more interesting. You see, that's what needs to be worked with. So in times, entire worlds are enveloped around you just to keep you constantly under some kind of test until you finally lock into the non-judgmental phase. That's the guy that comes into class with the cheat sheet and say, look, man, you need to get out of here with these guys. They're testing you and all that, but you already know. Like, listen, let me show you how you already know. Nothing that is powerful comes from something weak. Nothing that is powerful comes from something weak. So if you notice how the human being still has this great grandeur, but it's still just a smoke compared to what it really was. But this will prove, especially if you are one of those people that are headed back in the direction of totality, meaning to understand that all is self, you're not going to the future. You're going to what's called here, the past. Why? Because you already been it. If it was the future, you would be going to something you've never been before. Basically, you'd be getting more stupid. You'd be moving out into the Googleplex. To go back within and to torque down is obviously the full oneness in totality of self. So from that alone, just simple mathematical equations, it reveals where we really come from, something greater. And then where we headed back to is really the past as we collect ourselves back to the point of the Big Bang, which is really also another metaphor for the Big Bang is the big conflict. From that point, everything is exploded. And then space then creates time, meaning if you start driving through the galaxy, as you get closer and closer back to the origins of this bang, things come more and more together until eventually you reach the first haven, or some call it the first heaven. And then in the first haven are only those that you love. It's the last point, okay, before you get into totality. Because, see, love is a battlefield. And if you love something, it definitely causes you to hate something else and to protect and to fear. And you've chosen also a group of people or a certain thing that you like, but you're everything. So you see why God's threshold is the first haven? Because that was the first being that stepped into duality. And then so it only has there the ones it loves, right? So that's why you have to get beyond all of this. You go beyond, you get away from these evangels, which are basically the pathway between man and God. And then you reestablish that connection within yourself. You raise the Jed, which is basically sending the Kundalini from the coccyx of the spine all the way up through the middle pillar. Okay? And I will say that not everyone accomplishes. I've even worked on my accomplishment, because what the Tree of Sapphires is showing is that when you leave the coccyx of your spine, which is Malkut, and few people actually go straight up and right to the globe, like the Caduceus staff of Hermes shows. They either go left or right. Basically, either they go into Tantra or they go into yoga. And these are not necessarily the Tantra and the yoga as you see it as a tradition, but the energetics that Tantra or yoga actually equates to when you practice it. And that's called the left-hand path and the right-hand path.
Right.
right? And so obviously Crawley was on the tantric paths,
Right.
right? So,
Left.
but still, as you see, you're now zigzagging up the tree, which is not a good way to get to the location, because the easiest way to get to the location is a straight
Well,
line.
isn't that what most people really are doing anyway? They're kind of oscillating back and forth between the two paths, the two extremes, plus, minus, black, white, good, evil, negative, positive.
Absolutely.
Limit your time here. I just look, we've been running about 2 hours straight, and if you're good, keep going.
Well, yeah, I'm good. I mean, I just would need to use the restroom real quick, and then this is what I'm doing today. So tomorrow's a new day.
Do we want to take a break for like maybe
we
5
take a
minutes?
little break, and then what we'll do is when we come
Yeah.
forward, we'll talk about where we left off at is this zigzag path, and then how to get into that middle pillar, which is really the key thing, because you can see it even on the tracing boards. There's a middle pillar, and I know all about that straight path. And it's very easy to access as far as a concept. It's like I can explain it to you now. To achieve it is a constant thing. Like yesterday may not have been a good middle pillar day, is what I'm saying for me. So it's balance is, you don't see someone standing on a tightrope and they're just still. They're constantly swinging it to the left and swinging it to the right, and just So that's how it really is, because we're on something that's constantly moving. And so I'll leave with this while we go to the break, and that's why, again, the indigenous name for the supreme being was unmovable. Ooh. Because once something moves, it creates a wave. Then once it creates a frequency, then it creates a diametrically opposed frequency, and then dualistic worlds begin. So things come into manifestation. So that's man's infestation, basically, just tons of living fleshly organisms all over the place. And then, the main drawback, nobody knows where we came from, which is just, we got to end this cycle if we choose.
Okay.
All right.
We'll take the break. We'll be back in, let's say 5-6 minutes.
Okay.
And finish her up. Sevan Bomar is with us, and we'll take a break here. We'll be right back. One Off Planet Radio. Okay, so we are back. I've lost track of time, which is probably a good thing. I actually feel, good God, I almost feel almost stoned right now. The whole last couple hours have really gone by quickly, and we're kind of in that time thing again. But we've worked out the technical glitches, and we're kind of we've settled in, and we're kind of reaching the denouement of the conversation, which brings us back into how do we get out of the oscillation waves. And I welcome back for this segment, again, my guest, Sevan Bomar.
For sure. I mean, first of all, it's been a great night. Like I've had an amazing time, and especially with delivering the message, because we've gone through quite a bit. And this is definitely one of those that may want to sit down and listen to again. But I definitely feel like each person got touched with the message. And the good part about this is that you get to understand what's right, and also what's left. So that way you can collapse the good and the bad, because people want to say, well, what's the good part and how's the good part? Well, look at this. Let me show you easy how it works. Judging then is basically left or right, and the myriad of opposites. Now, you notice how when we start doing that day, night, and hot and cold, and we start just saying that kind of stuff, people can start coming up with all sorts of parodies, right? And it can keep going for a long time, and what happens is that we see now that the middle, which is, I guess, the mid-L, the basically the God, has figured out how to be in between. Okay? And what this is about coming out of judgment. Because now that when you're judging yourself, then you get a conviction, and then once you're convicted, you get time. That's how, look at
That's
it.
exactly,
That's
yeah,
exactly
that's
how
exactly
it
right,
works.
yeah.
See, the reason why the
Hard
legal
time.
system is duplicating this is because what a courthouse is it's a vessel. It is a Masonic vessel docked on land, but an accepted vessel, meaning it is under the acceptance of the king, which is an accepted Mason is under, it's not a speculative Mason. Speculative is what it is, speculating. A Freemason, an accepted Mason is one who is under allegiance to the king and has taken an oath to the king and will drive a vessel onto land and dock it and then court off a section and then have you in there under a whole nother jurisdiction. And then look, now all these words begin with J-U, chasing Juju down for multiple dimensions. That's Julius. Look, as a Jew, no offense, but realistically, the judge and all these words begin with the same thing, and this is why this is how you can understand this. And so, once that whole thing starts to take place, that whole law system and legal system, and this is really the boundaries that have been put onto the land in your consciousness. What's then built is the archonic template, and I sourced the image of this. Like maybe source it to my Facebook now. I have to dig it up. But basically, it becomes a temple that is constructed inside of your own consciousness that you end up having to get out. And so, like you were saying earlier, is this timeshare? Yeah, with lots of different kinds of atmospheres, just like the world, but a world in your body, where all these different kind of consciousness can live, and then they live over a collective band because it's connected to everyone on the biorhythmic field, which is all of us. That's why we don't fall slump, is because we're connected into the actual planet that drives the faculties behind our senses, which are divided as 5 senses. There we go with that number again. And so the person touch here, taste, sight, whatever, and then they feel like they kind of gotten the complete experience. But no, you've touched it with gloves on. You've touched it with thick gloves on. You don't know what it feels like. And so we have to take that medicine too, because that's where the ego has to be really checked. Because I see the ego at times as an enemy, but this is all the war going on in myself, because I'm not going to let this cat literally take me into a whole nother thing where I end up forfeiting when I'm the closest to what I've seen in my own consciousness, not judging where anyone else is, that I've actually made some progress into figuring out what the hell is going on. And I don't know for sure, if I don't pull this off completely within myself, that I'm just going to come back into another life and already pick up where I left off. There's nothing saying that. In fact, they say it's very complex, because when you're outside the body, you're in a frequency field that responds based on how you think. It doesn't speak English and wait for commands for English to tell it what is going on. It's going through the frontal lobe. And so at this point, you start manifesting things so fast, you build the world as fast as you're building the one in the dream. And this is what people need to understand, that they are a universe. You create universes, but the universe that you have is in your dream. All of those people, all that you create, you know how to identify with another frequency in order to reflect that frequency off of your own pineal gland, and then put together this light world that you project yourself into, but not to the beings that are in there as yourself. And I don't want to make it very confusing here, but listen. When's the last time you looked in the mirror in the dream world? Why are you assuming that's yourself? Why are you assuming that's you? Because even if you do it in this world, you've already learned, if you've learned anything, that you are not the body. So to try to identify with what you see in the mirror here is very difficult. But why are there not many mirrors on the dream plane? So I went and digged up a lot of this stuff. There's something really going on the other side of the mirror. And that's why in feng shui, they tell you, don't put the mirror like in your room, because your spirit sees it as a door. And it's because on the astral plane, that's all you really see is the mirrors are the doors. Mm-hmm. And these doors are into every place that there's a mirror.
Yes.
And, and so this kind of stuff, this is what I want to know. You see what I mean? This is what I want to be doing. This is what, I don't care what other people and other beings are doing. They're going to have to make way. So this is also where you end up getting very serious about understanding what exactly going on here, because see, people who have only been around a couple times in merry-go-round, they can go around a few more times and they'll love it. But people who have been sick of it and ready to get off, I'm talking about that. This what I encapsulated tonight is about how to get off of the spheric world that's based on fear, and actually get on to the disc first, which is your own DVD, your own David, your own craft, and then raise the Jed into the sky and hand out edicts. Edicts are lots and allotments and inheritances that haven't been collected, as everyone is getting their bills, but you're dealing really with only entities so that they can give you back your current. And this is a court then. You're on your disc, and now you're in galactic court, but you are really the judge for those who have done wrong to you, but not on a microcosmic level. Why are you going to blame the puppets? You need to go at the real thing. See, that's where my awakening came in, is that when I finally waxed strong with Mike, even talked to Enoch for a second, once I sat back and started really realizing what was going on, I realized it was favoritism. See, I never liked favoritism. Even when I was younger, I was always rooting for the underdog. When the underdog would win, that's when I was the happiest. So what happened to me is I was one of the people that could have easily went way beyond in this. David Blaine beyond, whatever the guy's name is. And then I sat back and I said, but it wouldn't be really anything if the people didn't know. I can't find happiness in knowing something without my brother and my sister knowing. And that was a violation. See, when you stop judging, that was my beginning of stopping judging, is what I'm trying to tell everyone. I got to the point where I was chosen. I didn't want to be a preacher. I wanted to be a prophet. And my mom was an evangelist. So we knew how to contact what was behind the curtain. And so when I got into a position in my life where I needed to either see what was behind door number 2 or accept something that I couldn't deal with, I didn't give up on myself. So don't give up on yourself.
Well, what you just described there, too, is the difference between the secret societies and what you really have been espousing, which is this open source spirituality, a concept that we didn't really get a chance to talk about, but I'm intrigued by the concept because I'm a software guy and I like open source software. I don't like closed systems. I don't like the sense that somebody's holding back on me, that there's like one thing that I don't. I'm one of these people that once I know there's a secret, it's going to drive me nuts until I can find out what it is.
Yeah, exactly. And that's that force that unites us. It's a collective projection. It's now so thick we live in it, meaning that it's just like a stream. This whole world that they created, which was digital, was created off of this platform of this world, and it's working in duality, which is just 2 integers. And then once we started being able to visualize what we really wanted, we built the bathroom. That's what we call it on the other plane, meaning that at one point, some people heard the story, but I was taken into this bathroom. And this bathroom had so many different little insects carved into the wood in the bathroom. And the being that was there said, I know each and every single one of these insects. I put them all there in my manifestation. That's how in tune with it you'll have to be a world builder. And so I had opportunities to hear from great parts of ourselves. That's what I come to tell people. Don't let no other star like blind you. And that's what this is about. This is about, see, Luciferians, Mercurians, those who stand closest to the sun, man, they can blind you because they're just like the moon magnifying the light from the sun, but they're not the sun. You're the sun. The reason why they can't be the sun is because you're the sun. But remember, it's not a male or a female. And then once you turn that on, and I told everyone what time it comes on. It comes on about, for most people, it's like between 4:30 and 5:23. Somewhere in there, there's about 30 minutes of full on straight projection. All 7 gates line up. And this is the moment also, if you have the counselor moves through. Counselor is kind of something gained when you're going through the Abrahamic fields, like all the Jehovian water-based deluge fields. You know, you may pick up a counselor, which is Sophia. It's like a quiet voice in the morning.
Wisdom, yeah.
Right, it's wisdom. But
But
it's a real thing. Like this thing be talking about stuff that you didn't really know, but in certain, not in a data way. It's just, all the knowledge. But if you can bring it back, and that's what I think is what happens with all of us, is that when you attempt to suppress it, when you attempt to misuse it, and then, it morphosizes into, Golem will not master the power of the ring just because of being the Golem, And it's a deeper thing to understand that this stuff locks itself out. There's no, what you can do, though, is you can work to really perfect the fields of the body. And this is where I think that's mankind's role back in a certain tense, is that when you take the responsibilities of those you went in pact with, what are we talking about? See, the head is you, but what's all the rest of this stuff? Where does this come from? And you look in the Eastern tradition where they got plenty of maps. This is all the animals that we made the pact with on the Mount of Harmon to build this 5-base body, which was supposed to be the apex of this particular dimension, and was supposed to hold up this dimension so that way light shines into lower dimensions. If someone wants to see how this really works, when it's all lined up, they say, 2012 came and it went. It basically did, because nobody lined up. When you line up, it's literally where your consciousness lines up with another person's consciousness on through galactic core, and that shines down like a beam. And then the lower regions where, there's got to be a base point. And this is what I've been getting into. This is what my fringe research is about. Okay, in the depth of the ocean. Now, first of all, you're not going to be able to know what goes on unless you know how to go deep. We can all agree. So this becomes very similar to diving in the ocean. Now, we got somewhat of an idea of how deep the ocean may be. But we cannot get to the bottom unless we go through the surface first. So just always remember that. That's the past. That's what's been going on. Now you plunge into the surface, you start going deeper, deeper, deeper. And then you eventually reach the point, like if you can get through basically those that were deluged. Because if you know what's going on, okay, let me tell you. Jehovah is a water-based being. It corresponds with the moon. That is the deluge period. Now, if you dried up all the world when it was in its Luciferian stage, what would it really look like? Because there's some pretty deep ravines in the ocean. It would look like a big cavern of some sort. Like you'd be deep in this cavern. There would be mountains so high that you couldn't even get over the mountains. So most of the entities, and this is where that's what the netherworld was, all lived in these crevices and ravines, the same way you watch on the beach crabs huddling deep in the holes in the ocean to avoid the wave, the cosmic wave. So what happens is that, oh man, I just realized that, we have gotten pretty deep into the conversation, but now when you go that deep, you got to take a moment and take a breath like, okay, where's my bathyscap? But anyway, okay. So what I'm getting at here is that to go into the depths of yourself, and I kind of completely lost my frame of thought only because I had gone so deep into self, and then you go into the visualization. But what I'm explaining is that in this visualization of what I just explained, you actually go through the core of the earth. Like, see, the outside of this planet is not what you think it is. They're going in the wrong direction. Right. I mean, of course, because that's always the case, but there's nothing out there that you want to meet. It's all external. So the real place is inside, and this is what was discovered. This is even what the paranormal division discovered. This is what Shambhala and all that really started connecting to, was the cavern system through this to the thing all the way to the core. But rather than getting to the core, which actually the Great Pyramid is one of the chambers that lead to it, you know, you can meditate on the core, but you go through the surface. It's a specific path. In a sense, you're going through the ocean and then into the depth. And then, so what I was saying is that to get through there, you have to go through your primordial states of consciousness. And this is why it was called the dweller of the threshold, because where you're actually going back through is the frequency of what all happened before you even got to where you are now. If you think, let's say the judgment word, this is sin. What do you think was going on in the time where the moon was actually called sin? And everyone knew that's Nanar sin. So this is like the whole dimension was onto something else different. And that was the foreground of what we're standing on right now. But we have to be able to not judge that. And if anything, to be aroused by it, meaning that, wow, I'm that great. As you're coasting through totality. Now, see, this is why it was in this prayer of Anana. Okay. In this process, Anana is stripped of all of her jewels, or different levels of her jewels, like her dress and her jewelry and her ring and all this. And what this is talking about when you come into this world, you put on all of this different facade. But if we took it all off, would you still be there? And so this is what it's like going through the depths of ocean, because you're seeing basically stuff that you thought it was all over, but it's now there as you're going back through the origin point. So do you see why for many people it's so difficult to get to the origin point? Because they can't deal with the primordial side of themselves by not judging it. So then, because many of these things don't fit phi, meaning the mind works to start to project visions that seem horrific, seem like basically fear. This is what blocks the energies to get you beyond. So just realize that. So this is a recovery. This is a deprogramming part. The first part of it is you just work on not going into judgment. And this is not always talking about if somebody's doing something that you already have the discernment to understand what direction you should be going in. Like, meaning that we're not saying that you should just accept everything that's going on and people are murdering and all this kind of stuff, and you're over here having a hard time coming out of judgment. First of all, you shouldn't even be looking at that kind of stuff right now. You should be focusing on building your sphere by putting the right type of things and elements into your body while you're still on consumption. And this would, of course, be like right now I'm on hydrogen. I have a hydrogen formula that just fell into my hands like 4 days ago, and this is what I'm going to do the video on. It's miraculous. It's not only able to be assimilable for the body, it's measuring at negative 400 orp. That means that it actually is regenerating. Let me just explain this orp thing real quick. It's the last science class of the night. What orp is that if something, orp is measured in millivolts, and it's really strange because it works backwards to how you would normally see it. Something with a high orp also highly oxidates something. This is why when you leave an apple out, it starts to turn brown. This is called oxidating. So if something's in the positive orp, it oxidates things rather fast. So to get an idea, soda is in 420 orp. Positive, obviously, it's an oxidator. It will eat everything that it gets on like an acid. General tap water is like 200 orp. So this stuff is still oxidating. It's not actually replenishing anything. So when you drop some of this stuff into this water with this hydrogen ion, all of a sudden it comes out at negative 400 orp. See, there's no secret.
So is this like superstructured water?
It's beyond that. Like, man, I've been studying water for like 5-6 years. Like, they've been trying to fire this water through these vortex tubes, but it may be structured, but what of it? What is its energetic potential? And so we take a orp. It's a simple meter. It only costs like $24. And you measure the millivolts coming from the element. You could stick cabbage in it. You could stick celeries in it. You could stick anything that you're about to eat in it. It'll tell you how strong it is. And then you can see on the meter when a plant begins to die. Meaning that the moment that is ripped from this root, if you plug it in, you'll watch the millivolts be really high, and then it'll start going down lower and lower and lower. So, of course, if one is to consume it during that point, they get more than millivolts. But you can see also, even when I explain it like that, though, the situation we've got ourselves into. Because, it's even the vegetables you start having pity on after a while, not just the animals.
Yeah, yeah. Like, is there really nothing you can eat? What are you going to eat?
Well,
Rocks?
I mean, what happens
they're
is
alive too.
what happens is this is really another show, but there's a way to get the body to a point where, basically you just put into the body. It depends on what kind of system you're running. There's a way to run a system that really just runs on nutrients and water. It depends on what kind of water you're drinking. But there's also, there's a more, it's just, again, why I'm saying it depends on what level you're on, because if you got a mission and you need to go through devacanic planes, you're going to need a little bit tighter wound on your physical generator, meaning the tightness of your muscle is actually how well the generator can conduct, just like how you finely wind down a wire on a rotor. So what happens is that the body, to do that, needs some form of protein in order to get that kind of muscle structure. So what happens is that all the proteins that you really see available, that would be for a vegetarian or something of that nature, that don't have a lot of chemicals and metals in it that really mess more with the mind. Even though it does great for the body, it destroys the mind. All the other proteins, they are not complete. You have to have brown rice, hemp seed, and oh my goodness, hold on real quick. Oh, pea. There's a pea protein. Yellow pea protein. Now, when those three combine, they make a complete protein. So then you go look on the shelf and you see all these people talking about you've done research on stuff like that on protein. They come out with this new vegetarian protein. And then it's not complete. It's either made out of soy or made out of a bunch of combinations of other things that don't equal enough of one of them for it to be ever a balanced protein. So this is a big Achilles heel, because, see, if you can't get off plasma, slow down plasma, then you become subject to the karma of the Cars nation, which is basically you consume, you will be consumed. But this doesn't mean that you go into sadness because you can't eat this thing anymore. There's better tasting things, and even to the point where if you need to just work your way through it, you can go and get stuff like the Griller's Prime. Like some people say, oh, that's horrible to eat. Well, for a person that's just eating meat, if you just understand that it's going to taste the same basically, but what they've done is they've moved themselves out of the karma. They stopped the karma. The karmas that are the ones that are activated after that are really light. So the person really starts to ascend right from there, because they stop the blood sacrifice basically that's going on, especially with the cows. And I posted something about that just recently. But so once that happens, then you raise a rung. You go over the Lord. Look, the Lord was a horned God. That's why they always show it as a horned God, right? So this horned God is a cow in a certain tense. It's MLK, Moloch, which is where we get milk, MLK. And so to get beyond the horned God, you must not consume. You must not take part in this sacrifice of this sun, which is really not a sun. You see, it's the moon. But this is the ghost god of Goth. So that's why when you think about occultism, okay, and you start talking like that, you need a special platform to be communicating about that kind of stuff. Because if a person's just coming in from nowhere and just on the line, they're like, what? Let me get out of here. But it's a real deal. So you see where the adept is? Because the adept knows about the Germanic god Gud, who's king of Britain, which has his knights and those that they've knighted, and also sworn workers and builders all around. It basically surrounds itself. Like, you see how this, it's like a shell. In the center is the being. And then from that emission, from emitting out, is all of its different levels of protection before you would reach the center, right, of what would be known as the maze. Okay? Because if you remember that this king that I'm talking about is actually you. See, a lot of people, they were already about to do something to these folks. But the reality is that all the adepts, all the Gnostics knew that this king was residing within inside of us. It was the last point you have to reach. And remember, it's a king-queen. This word is Cain, Qaheen. This is Cain in our English language, which becomes a male because our whole tradition is to take us away from the other side, which becomes the feminine component. It becomes Mary. Mary is the root to the word maritime, so it obviously means mar. Mar is the ocean, red ocean to be exact. And so that whole connection of what went on there, and this also even connects with the planet Mars. It connects with why the planet Mars is red. It connects with why women have menstruation cycles. All of this stuff becomes for little kids and neophytes. Oh my goodness, oh no, oh. So they can't get out. So what we've done is we've innovated even further, and we'll just talk very briefly on open source spirituality. See, you never blame anyone else if you're trying to bring something across and it doesn't work. You're using the wrong tools. So what open source spirituality is allowing other people to become the bridge to people that they're more in sync with. So that way someone such as myself may not have to sit into certain sessions where I'll just be brutally pelted by dense life forms while I'm trying to get my message across, which is basically being ignored. This could be broken down several times. Like you could take the entire conversation right now and write an encyclopedia on just the topics that were presented about basically time being frequency and how these idiots that generally study this kind of stuff blew past it a long time ago. How the hell can you sit with 7 or 8 master's degrees and all sorts of degrees? These people are not stupid. Like you sit down there, recite every single chemical in the entire thing, the rack, and then miss that simple stuff like the animals are actually the portals that people are coming through that are shape forming and fashioning their souls into a greater stage of experience. You see what I mean? Like, to understand that the actual curve within the eye is the limitation of the frequency that the being can actually inhabit or think it's inhabiting. And that's encoded within the eye of Ra. And also that there's many elements that are in nature that are sworn allies. Sworn allies. We're just made to forget them, meaning that there are bridges in natures that swore that if we were to come to the wake up, they would be right there with us. And so that's also where it gets interesting because it's happening now. Like, and don't make no mistake, this is not something that's going to happen. Some people say, well, when? When is it? Oh, no. Don't think we were waiting on you. This is a party going on now, baby. It's just about whether you're in it or not. And to get in it, you have to really get into it. You have to get into yourself. You have to become aroused by yourself again. You're going to have to conquer the monsters that are the things that you consumed. Remember, it's all through suggestion. So if they give you the hamburger, if they give you the Skittles, if they give you the Black Mamba, if they give it to you and you put it in your portal and you eat it, then it remains inside of you until you vibrate or oscillate higher than it. So it forms around you like a shell. And that's why it only takes really one awakening. But that's how awakenings can be rather startling because it breaks this shell from around you, right? And so the person is looking to get into higher vibratory frequencies, eat things that are higher vibratory so they can break the shell, so they can collapse the consumption. Because as every Indian guru will tell you, if you consume the prana, you live in the pranayama. Simple. If you consume anything here, you will always be here kind of, experiencing yourself as that what you consumed. So when we get into higher levels of consumption, hydrogen, you're already backing yourself off of the supplies. You still got stuff going on. They're going to get crazy about it. You don't want this to be your worst enemy. You can wing the rest, but at least make an effort here. Like, and then also remember, you have your companions. You have me. You have all the individuals that are involved in the collective projection of our expansion. That's some field that you can tap into. It's strong and it's always active. It's online 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's like a tow truck on the astral plane. Right? So that's something that you just realize. You have your brothers and sisters, your mothers and fathers, and the rest of every other being that is in progressing towards totality here with this knowledge and information. But you will be the one to help hold the wand and to balance the wand. That's really how this is. It's nobody that can do it for you. So now you'll realize the last hang up with the religions. If there's somebody doing it for you, then that's not the truth. Nobody can do it for you but you. And that's where the most power comes in, because then when you know you've done it yourself, there's no one to bow down to. And that's when you've now gone into sovereign. And man, that's where I'm headed, baby. So if you're trying to see me again, sovereign. Because what happens with the soul sovereign is, man, you You're gliding across the cosmos and even beyond. And the sovereign doesn't have anything on it, like trying to, you know what I mean. I can't even get into it because it's got nothing on it. You can't even say what's on it because it doesn't have nothing on it. But that's where we are, and that's where we are going to be. And the reason why I was saying it that way is to remember what I said about time, that we're going to something that we already were. When you pray or whenever you do, don't stop talking, because I stopped talking for a while and it seemed to weaken me. And I would say like 6 years of not talking, but basically to understand finally that you're talking to yourself, and it's good to send that start pinging that from basically what I understand and have experienced from these other planes and these other worlds that we exist in and how they come together. So that's it.